I'm gonna get a cup of tea. I'm cold.
Oh. Oh, how did?
Sorry, guys. Nope, there's an echo. Yep.
Yeah, your speakers either have to be muted or you have to have headphones on.
It was coming from down there, I think. Got it figured out? I don't hear it anymore. All right. I have my gavel back. Calling the meeting to order for August 17th, 2020. Attendance is 100%. We have 4 members in chambers and 3 on Zoom. And for those in the gallery, you can see the Zoom meeting okay? Awesome. And we have no one's presenting, right, Cheryl, even at last minute? Okay, we're skipping past. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Mackay,
That the August 17th, 2020 agenda be adopted as presented.
thank you. Call for the vote. And Cheryl, why don't you just, when everybody's voted, let us know that it's carried, or I can do that.
You can look at it.
Yeah, okay, that's unanimous. Okay. We're getting into the new norm. Presentations, nothing, moving on from 3 and 4. Consent agenda. So we did have 2 things pulled off of consent, actually 3. We have the homelessness task force pulled off consent, which is item number
7.2.
7.2. We have the 7.4, the solar farm business case pulled, and Councillor Jolly had a good point about the way some of the motions are worded for 7.5, so I pulled that off just so we can get better wording. So can I have somebody make a motion to approve the rest on consent? Councillor Broadhead, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the recommendations in the following agenda report be approved. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes of June 29th, 2020 and July 6th, 2020, and special council meeting minutes of July 27th, 2020 and August 4th, 2020. 7.1, community living standing committee draft unadapted minutes and agenda items from July the 13th, 2020. 7.3, Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee draft minutes and agenda items from July 13, 2020. 7.6, Operation and Financial Review Internal Audit Steering Committee selection of consultant. 10.1, Information Item 2020 Q2 Financial Summary. And 11.1, AUMA Vice President endorsement.
All right, thank you. Call for the vote. Jackie in favor, Natalie in favor, everyone's in favor. Okay, that's unanimous. Minutes, we just did that. Committee business, we just did that. Okay, so moving on to 7.2. I'm not going to read out the recommendations, and the other ones are pretty easy. 7.2, you pulled it off?
I did.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if Mr. Hiltz, is there a presentation? That was in our agenda package.
Trina's just popped on.
Katrina there.
Do you have a presentation for us?
I do. May I go ahead?
Same one that we came up with, probably a good idea.
Okay. I'm just going to share my screen and see if that is that working for people?
We can see it.
Perfect. Great when technology works. So thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to be here today just to give you a brief.
One sec, Trina, Luke, for some reason the screen sharing is not showing up on the big screens. There it is. Thank you. All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Oh, thank you. So just going to give you a brief overview of the task force process findings and their recommendations today. So just to start with, oops, I spoke too quickly when I said technology was working. Trying to put this through. Apologize for this. Let me just try one more thing. Hit It's not advancing my screen that I'm sharing with you. So I'm just going to try one more time. Okay, there we go. And you can see it again, I'm assuming, yes?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. So the task force membership, the task force included a lot of expertise that contributed to the process, and that was, of course, Council Admin, so Mayor Herron and Councillor Mackay, as well as the MLA for St. Albert, Mustard Seed Edmonton, Dean Kerpajuit was the chairperson, George Spady Centre, RCMP, we had a rep from Alberta Health Services, Community Village Food Bank, Children's Services, Métis Child and Family, and Michif Cultural Connection. So quite a wide variety of people on the task force contributing to the process and the recommendations. And next, okay, so the timeline, just to give you a review of the timeline. So January 2018 was when the task force was created. And then the task force worked from about March to November 2018 to really delve into what the scope of the work would be, and that was finalized and the direction given. So the first 6 months of 2019, going through research and data verification. And out of that process, 4 vulnerable groups were initially identified. And those were seniors, newcomers, women and children leaving domestic violence, and youth. And then from there, the housing options for those four groups were researched further, and they were mapped what existing resources. And as a result, the biggest gap was for youth, especially in the areas of, say, 15, 16 up to early 20s. And then different models for addressing youth homelessness were researched, and then as well at the same time, upstream homelessness prevention strategies were also part of that. So that's the general timeline, and then just some of the main task force findings. We did find that as of December 2019, there were roughly 167 homeless people in St. Albert. And then based on interviews with City of St. Albert youth counselors, outreach school, social workers, library, RCMP, youth in St. Albert were identified as being unstably connected with their family and natural supports. And that means they haven't completely disconnected, but the connection is tenuous and it goes back and forth. And that is a key time to intervene so that youth don't become completely disconnected from their supports. Then we know that we undertook some interviews with several agencies who work with youth to find out what they thought or what they saw would be some of the best interventions. And they really recommended that a youth transitional home would work best for youth in St. Albert. And the literature supported that as well, that a transitional housing with advocacy support would be the best support for the kind of issues addressing our youth and the nature of the makeup. From there, really kind of delving into what municipal roles are being played in Alberta around the issues of social housing and homelessness. And so what we did find that certainly over, especially the last 5 to 10 years, there has been quite an increase in municipal involvement in this issue. It's also gained more prominence nationally as well as provincially, and so it did coincide with that. So if we look at 3 main functions that municipalities can play, and I mean there's lots of nuances to this, but just to divide it into 3 main areas, is an advocacy role. And that can be, most municipalities in Alberta take on this role, and that is advocating to the provincial, federal orders of government, looking for dollars to support local projects to address social housing and homelessness needs, and that can be through the intergovernmental function. Some have specific staff dedicated to this function. So advocacy is pretty common all the way across the board. Also, many municipalities lead the coordination of strategies to address homelessness and social housing. So that means acting as a convener, working with some of the regional housing authorities, housing agencies, organizations, doing joint planning, issue identifications, needs assessment, higher level coordinating, and that backbone role. So by that backbone means pulling everybody together and being sort of the keeper of the results and continually driving towards results. The third main area is around partnerships. And again, that varies depending on the municipality, but often it's providing capital and sometimes operational funding, working in partnership, again, with regional housing authorities, housing organizations. It can be contributing dollars towards either brick and mortar capital costs and also can be the operation of housing initiatives. For example, Grand Prairie gives $100,000 a year for operational dollars for their housing body. And there are many, many tactics that a municipality can undertake as well to support these functions. So I'm just going to give you some examples of a few of the tactics that we pulled out. So under coordination, housing advisory boards can really provide that coordination role. And we know that Red Deer, Grand Prairie, and Medicine Hat, for example, all have housing advisory boards that work with regional authorities as well, but that are housed within the municipality and coordinate and ensure that they pull everybody together, including residents. Capital resources, probably one of the biggest tactic that is used. So everything from land leases, capital funds, and the list is very long. So from Wood Buffalo, Calgary, Strathcona have all contributed some capital to address housing issues. And then staff resources. And again, we know that sometimes housing falls under existing staff. So you have planning and development staff who are involved in housing, some FCSS staff, but we also know that more and more municipalities are designating staff. So Banff has a manager of housing sustainability, Red Deer has a social planning team and a housing coordinator. Spruce Grove, their report is going to council soon that recommends adding 2 staff to deal with this issue directly. And again, some use existing staff as opposed to dedicated staff for this. And so, yeah, and Grand Prairie is another one that has just has 1 staff for it. So I wanted to give you just a sense of what's happening out there across Alberta and what municipal involvement is across the board. And it is a spectrum for sure, but certainly far more municipalities are involved at some level with housing than they were, I would say, a decade ago. So the task force came up with 3 recommendations that they put in the final report, which I know have attached as well. And their recommendation was the development of a business plan for the construction and operation of a St. Albert transitional home, being about 8 to 10 beds, primary target being 16 to 21-year-olds. And they were pretty clear that their recommendation is the ongoing operation would be the responsibility of an agency that has experience in providing housing for the target population. So they weren't recommending that the city of St. Albert operates a transitional home, but rather works with and finds an agency that has some expertise in this area. And in the council report, you would have seen the AR that the estimation was an operating cost would be around $650. I mean, St. Albert may, if we want, perhaps give a grant for a very small portion of that operating, but the intent was to look at provincial and federal grants to operate. Also, as far as a capital project charter, first phase could be a feasibility study, which would include costing, partnerships, and site recommendations. Second phase could be around the implementation of that. And their second recommendation was that administration create a new social housing position to provide some of those functions mentioned that other municipalities do. Social lens, focusing on local needs around social housing, and also looking at the other 3 vulnerable populations that are not part of this initial report and recommendation. And that thirdly, that council approved the task force to continue working as a St. Albert leader of coordinated partnerships and actions. And so looking at taking a holistic approach and looking at prevention all along the spectrum to intervention for housing. So as I said, I would be brief, and so that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Yeah, so questions now. I just lost all of. I can only see Katrina. Can we pack it on grid view again, Luke, so I can see hands going up? Questions? Did you have one, Councillor McKay?
Yeah, I see there's a few, but I can start off here first. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I also want to make sure that even at this time, in case I forget it later, I want to thank all of the staff and particularly all of the task force expertise who freely volunteered their time and knowledge that really kind of made this task force a success. So just for clarity then, in relation to some of the recommendations coming out of it is, so the $650,000 to operate wouldn't be necessarily entirely on us as a city to fund. We could look at partnerships, we could look at potentially identifying other grants. And so realistically wise, the task force, and clarify this for me particularly, or for everybody listening, the idea wasn't that we would necessarily build it and operate it entirely as a municipal department.
That's correct. Yes, it would be finding a partner who already operates transition housing and that they would run it.
So the actual $650,000, is that, would that include just capital, or would that be part of the operating, or is that a separate line item?
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, that would be that is the yearly operating cost that's estimated for a 8 to 10 bed transitional home. And so again, the intent was never that City of St. Albert would be responsible for that. The next step would be to look at partners and funding so that someone else, another agency or an agency would run it, and then looking to secure funding from federal, provincial sources as well.
So we wouldn't need to develop the expertise in-house. We would certainly hopefully identify partners that had that particular expertise and would potentially identify through whatever environmental scan or whatever the needs would be in our community, and then operate it. Do you see this as being something specifically for our community, or would we have some outreach into perhaps regional communities?
We could explore regional opportunities, and then we would be able to increase our potential grant base for certainly. The thought was that 8 to 10 beds could be filled with St. Albert youth at this time, but I think it would be worthwhile exploring regional and being able to accommodate that, and again, opening up potential new funding sources.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all my questions.
All right, I see both Councillor Jolly and Councillor Hanson have their hand up in the Zoom participants. So why don't we go with Natalie first and then Jackie.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It wasn't clear during our committee meeting that the intent was to have an outside agency run this facility. So that it was good to get that clarity. So you've said that the next step is to find a partner. If that's what the next step is, why is the recommendation for the City of St. Albert to develop a business plan and not to have an RFP like we have for the affordable housing project, for example?
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, the first step of a capital project charter would be a feasibility study. So it would go through the capital project charter, and that we would be requiring, the RFP would ask a consultant to look at partnership opportunities, funding opportunities, and site recommendations. So those 3 elements.
So since the City of St. Albert is not an expert, I guess I'm trying to get around, like, why aren't we kind of looking for, Hope Mission to propose a plan that would work, because they're the experts in that kind of thing, the same way we have for the affordable housing project. Why are we keeping it in-house, I guess?
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, I think the intent was that because we had expertise from so many social agencies and housing agencies around the table in the development of this, that the transitional housing certainly was the preferred intervention going forward, and that a capital project charter would provide us that additional information and again, finding partners, exploring all of those pieces as the next step.
So we're just looking at the capital side, not the operation side at this time?
The partnership would include operational as well as capital.
Okay, that's all I have right now.
Councillor Hanson.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Katrina. I have some questions just around advocacy. And you will know the Parent Link Center model very well. I'm wondering if the government of Alberta has, in terms of advocacy, is it just funding that we're advocating for, or is there an opportunity to find government programs to be implemented into our city as part of this? Or, yeah, just trying to understand the parameters of advocacy, if it's just funding that we're looking for.
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, advocacy, certainly the function and the role that many municipalities have used advocacy is for the whole spectrum. So not just about brick and mortar and not just about one intervention, but actually looking at from prevention to homelessness, early intervention, and response to. And so typically the housing advisory boards did take responsibility for more than just the brick and mortar or more than just the physical building. They looked at what the entire community needs would be around this issue and work with different orders of government and local agencies and as housing authorities to address those. So yes, you're right that it would be broader.
Okay, so the government doesn't necessarily have a housing project. All of the work is always done through these advisory boards and commissions and that sort of thing. So they don't own something like the Parent Link Center for Youth Transition or youth homelessness.
Thank you. There isn't one specific, but there is a Ministry of Housing, Seniors and Housing, and so there are specific projects. There's also operational funding through a variety of different areas as well. But there isn't, you're correct, there isn't one-stop shop as there was with Parent Link Centers.
Okay, yeah, and because I was just, in terms of advocacy, you're trying to find the easiest win to get the funding from the government. And so you're looking for the most direct pathway to that funding. And that's why I asked the question. But around getting partnerships and you say that there's that the partnerships, what I'm trying to understand is most of those advisory boards that run youth homelessness or other organizations are already getting funding from the government to run their programs. So is it going to be difficult for us to ask for money on top of that, or are we going to be completely relying on the money that our partners can come up with? And do you think that there's an appetite for that at the government level to actually fund us on top of what we find, whoever we partner with?
Thank you for that question. I think that things have very much changed in the last 6 months as far as what is available to governments. I think it's a new landscape, and I think we have to explore that. One of the most important things that we need to do is demonstrate the need and demonstrate the gap here. So you're correct that 2 of the advisory boards I mentioned, they do have funding coming into that community already. The other one, though, doesn't have as much funding coming in. And so some of them did start with being that advisory board advocacy group, like the task force, that lays the groundwork for the next steps.
Thank you. It's a great report. and I can see that it's thorough, and I just want the advocacy part of it to work. Thanks.
All right, I see Councillor Watkins also has his hand up, and then Councillor Hughes, you're after him.
Yes, my question is, the $650,000 is just operating costs, is that correct, per year?
Correct.
And what about the capital cost to build the facility? Are we looking for the partners to come up with that also?
We would be looking for grants and yeah, we wouldn't be looking at the city to provide all of the capital costs. There might be some incentives, there might be some land. It really does depend though on finding a site. And that would be the first part of the project charter, would be looking at whether or not we would be using an existing building. Are we going to repurpose a building that's out there, or does it need a new building? So all of that costing should happen in phase 1. And then council would have the opportunity to review it and decide whether or not they supported it going to the next phase.
Do we have any idea what a facility like this costs? This capital cost to build?
It's so dependent on the structure that we go with. So for example, Grand Prairie rents a house to house 5 youth. They rent just an existing house and they put some supports in. So that's a very different cost to having a separate building that maybe would have even more elements that we would be looking for. So there's a real spectrum, and it has to be what we decide we have the appetite for that can still meet the needs.
Okay, thank you. My question.
All right, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I can't remember when we've had a full presentation after it's already been on a committee meeting before. I'm just commenting. That's the first time I've seen it come back as a full presentation after it's already been discussed at committee. A couple of questions here. So whichever neighborhoods are going to be affected, how much public consultation are we doing for this?
I thank you. Through Madam Mayor, we would be following all of our public consultation guidelines and all of our land use consultation requirements.
Yeah, because I'm thinking there could be quite a bit of concern from the neighborhoods that are being affected. I'm just wondering, are we going to do public consultation and then choose the site, or are we going to choose the site and then inform the public? Because are we going to let people know about the multiple areas that are being considered, or are we going to be choosing it and then doing the consultation? Do we have any idea about that?
I believe the way it would work, and maybe somebody from planning can let me know if I'm off base here, is that we would take the recommendations and then go from there to do consultation.
Okay. So my understanding when I read the report was that we're looking at putting both women and men in the same building and putting them on different floors and having, I can't remember, was it 5 or 6 beds for each floor? Is that what we were, because I know when you spoke to Councillor Watkins, you were referring to a different type of model. So what kind of a business case are we suggesting coming forward? Are we looking at that with 12 beds or 10 beds, or what are we thinking of?
Sure, thank you. So the recommendation is 8 to 10 beds, and to have private bedrooms and separate bathroom facilities based on gender. It may or may not be 2 floors, that could be on 1 floor, but it's the separation, private bedroom, so not shared space for sleeping, and also gender separate bathrooms.
Okay, but both genders will be on the same building.
It would be in the same building, correct?
Okay. And so the $650,000 per year is based on this 8 to 10 bed model. That's correct?
Correct.
So how many staff are we thinking we're going to need to man that then? Like I'm thinking that's like 13 staff, or how many staff are we thinking would be there?
So the calculations were based on some of the models that exist in Edmonton for these types of homes, where you have 2 staff on at all times. So again, the youth would be screened to be youth who would be successful in this setting. The focus would be on helping them with life skills, working through employment issues if that's what they needed, or education, and it would be a supportive environment. This isn't meant as a group home in what the traditional sense that you may be thinking.
Wait. Okay. So the other question, if we're going to have an outside agency run it in its entirety, I'm still trying to figure out the need for a staff person.
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, the staff person wouldn't be for the operation of this, this transitional home. That operation will be separate. The staff person is around that overarching social needs, social housing, social housing lens. So looking at coordinating and working with people to do upstream homelessness prevention, to look at other areas where we may need some supports in our community, as with seniors, newcomers, women and children who are leaving family violence. So it's very much around all homelessness, not to run this specific home. This would be turned over operation to a partner.
Okay, so we have an affordable housing person. We don't have any affordable housing projects, and if we do, we'd only have one. And we're going to have one other person deal with a lot of other areas of homelessness, it sounds like. Like we have, I'm trying to figure out how that person would handle domestic violence issues, for example, without having somewhere for them to go. Like there's one in Morinville who spent a lot of money privately in fundraising to have it happen. Sonoma doesn't have that. I don't know what beyond what SAFE would do, what St. Albert would not do if it's not a duplicate.
Okay, thank you. Through Madam Mayor, so one of the gaps, and it wasn't as urgent a gap as the gap that was identified for youth, is that once women and children stay at a shelter and they are ready to leave, oftentimes they have to leave their community to go into Edmonton or somewhere where there is more affordable housing for them. So it really is about them living independently, but finding a place where they can stay that provides housing at a rate that they can afford for their first couple of years after they've left the situation.
Okay, so that's affordable housing. That's affordable. That would fall under the affordable housing category. I think that's what the Housing Society would be doing that. So that does sound like a duplicate. I just want to also just reflect on what Councillor Dolly said about the process of it, because it sounds like we're going through the whole steps and then trying to find a partner, which may or may not fit into the solution that we have determined we want to go down. So other than really just committing the city to doing this without having a full picture, I'm trying to figure out why we aren't trying to find a partner, see what their model is, and then see if that works for us, as opposed to saying, here's the model, now we'll find a partner that fits into it. The logical step needs to be find a partner, see how their model is, see what their costs would be, see what their reasonable expectations would be, and then decide if we want to go into it. And instead, we're actually doing it in reverse.
Actually, I'm just going to answer that a bit, Katrina, because we actually had those experts at the table when we developed these recommendations. Two of the biggest, Mustard Seed and James Spady, and they know how this is done, and they were the ones that said this is the right model. So it's actually not the city; it was some of the experts around the table.
Okay, so then to follow, and they're not here.
Yeah, Katrina, is that how your understanding?
Yes, absolutely. That was the reason that those members were recruited, was so that we could get that feedback as we developed the recommendations. And we had some robust conversations about what would be the best path. I think what was really important, and I think what drove a lot of this, was ensuring that it was a St. Albert solution, because there can be some differences in how homelessness is experienced in this type of community versus perhaps inner city Edmonton or some other or very rural communities. And so I think that the driver was to bring people together, as well as getting feedback from youth themselves and people who work with youth as to what would work best in this community, and then find a partner who could deliver what our community needs.
Have we had any discussion with potential partners of what they could do? Because I feel like we're just kind of shooting in the dark here for solutions, then seeing if someone will match it up. So have we had any discussions with potential partners?
That would be the next phase. Once the report was completed and the results were public, then it would be looking for partners would be the next phase.
Yeah, and
But nothing so far.
that some of the partners around the table would be interested in operating this, and they know of others that would be as well.
Okay. Okay, thanks. No more questions.
All right, I see Councillor Jolly has her hand back up, and then I'll go to Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. So just to follow up to some of Councillor Hughes' questions, having to do with, having men and women separated, what kind of considerations were discussed for non-binary or trans youth?
Thank you. Yes, that was discussed as well. So it was based on gender identity. So people would be provided beds and access to washroom facilities based on the gender that they identified with.
So where they're comfortable. Okay.
Hold on, Councillor Jolly, I'm going to answer that as well. I'm actually looking at Cindy. What was the name of that organization that came and presented to us? Do you remember? No, there was a young gentleman that I met at the Out Loud, and he came and presented. What was it? Anyway, I can get you the name, Councillor Jolly, but we actually had that exact conversation. We had somebody come and present who deals with youth homeless who are gender questioning, all that in that area. So we made sure that expertise is part of this report. And I can get you the name of their organization.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my last question kind of is around the process a little bit. So we've heard the kind of presentation having to do with the report and the recommendations of the task force, but we haven't heard anything on the recommendations of the CLSC. So I'm just, I don't know, Councillor Mackay is the chair, if you're presenting those. I know you don't agree with them, so I don't know if Councillor Hughes is going to take that on as vice chair. So.
But it's not so much disagreeing with that, if I can just answer that question, Madam Mayor. It's just that the way that the process moved forward, we can certainly, they were included in the minutes that were approved. And obviously I was going to do it as part of when we read in the recommendations, and then I was just obviously going to feed into that, but I don't know whether that would work for you, Councillor Jolly.
I'm just curious. I just found it really strange as well that we had kind of the recommendations that are not the CLSC's recommendations being presented, and I found that quite strange as well, Councillor Hughes.
Well, I think there's been one other one that was going forward in relation to a committee just from the other committee, and I think we're still balancing what can come forward and what can't come forward and how it's presented, but it is contained in the minutes. The minutes were approved on the consent agenda. I'm not sure what other way other than the way we're doing it. I'm certainly was going to open with that anyways.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused, Councillor Jolly. Are you saying that what's recommended to council is not what CSLC recommended?
No, in the presentation, there were 3 recommendations, which are not the recommendations that are being considered today.
I actually checked the slide. It said task force recommendations.
Yeah, and the slide's accurate. It just, especially for the public, that's going to be very confusing because there's a presentation that doesn't relate to what we're voting on. So it's a little bit tricky.
Okay, I think I'll give her some leniency. She should probably use the same presentation she gave the committee. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I didn't quite understand your question. I apologize.
Okay, is that all your questions, Councillor Jolly? Okay, moving on. I've got Councillor Mackay, then Councillor Hanson.
My question would be to Mr. Scoble then. I mean, based on some of the questions we're hearing about, I mean, there's certainly a lot of questions that were intended to basically be determined as next step. This is just basically, if this is approved at council, it just moves forward into basically the budget, basically the preparation of a business case, whether it's operating, whether it's staff, if that goes forward. It still has to be vetted all the way through regular SLT processes before it even makes it back here. And so a lot of the questions are very part of the process that we're hoping that we move on to next. Is this your understanding as well?
Yes, that's correct. So, depending on what the direction of council is today, it would go through that process where, again, there'd be business cases as there is for any FTEs or incremental operating costs like that. So it would show up in the proposed budget for council's consideration.
Oh, maybe not.
There we go. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So, I mean, basically, it's just it may come back with a recommendation not to go forward based on other priorities that we're facing, particularly caused by the pandemic. That's pretty an obvious, maybe kind of a softball question, but I'm assuming that's a yes.
Yeah, that's right. We're prioritizing and things come, we don't so much provide the priorities, but they are internally prioritized.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit a follow-up from Councillor Mackay's. With the final report being presented today, how difficult and how time-consuming for staff would it be to come up with a capital project charter for us? Is that another major thing, or with this report being done, is it relatively, would it be relatively smooth and easy to put together?
Yeah, it would be, I guess, within the range of what a normal business case would be. I don't see it as being extraneous in terms of effort to put it together. So.
All right, I am seeing no more hands popping up. Councillor Mackay, as chair of the committee, want to let us know your intentions, what you're bringing forward.
Just some direction, because I did put in, I can read as per Councillor Jolly's request, because certainly the presentation today was different than the one given to committee. And I can certainly, part of my recommended motions was to read in the 3 that were approved at committee. And then I had sent in already an amendment that or addition that I would also introduce the 4th one that committee that failed at committee. So
Why don't we do the first 3?
Okay.
And we can group them together, and then we'll take the one that failed at committee as a separate motion.
Okay. All right.
Otherwise, somebody's probably going to split it out anyways.
I was going to think
Yeah.
that might already have happened.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So the recommended motions is that the City of St. Albert's Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness final report dated June 1st, 2020 be received for information. That capital project charter, along with future operating impacts, be developed and added to the 2021-2030 growth capital plan to be considered as part of the 2021 budget process for the construction and operation of a new youth transitional home using an advocacy model as per the Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness recommendations. That the Mayor's Task Force continue to support the coordination of homelessness prevention strategies among local, regional, provincial, and national organizations, as well as the public and private sectors.
All right, accept that motion. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering if there's any questions based on that.
Can we split these, Mayor Herron?
Sorry?
I assume Councillor Hughes wants it split as well.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Can we have these split?
You want all 3 split? Okay. Doing them one at a time, Cheryl. Okay, go ahead. Just
Okay.
the first one, I guess. Is
Well, I'm just based on the first one. My only comments will be, and because it's just really is that the report be received as information. And I pretty much opened it up in some of my questionings. Is that I just want to thank everyone that was on the committee. I mean, obviously, I'm going back to when Mayor Herron, you and I were at a presentation on homelessness at the United Church shortly. I'm trying to remember if it was just right after the election. And certainly the presentation was strong. It brought home the fact that St. Albert is impacted by homelessness. and that there was a real community need to at least look at what homelessness looked like in the city of St. Albert. So we were able to put together a task force that looked at a number of different factors, a number of different issues as you identified in the report. I mean, certainly we did look at the ability of affordable housing. We did look at the impact of domestic violence. We did look at seniors, and we were able to also identify a significant challenge that's facing St. Albert around youth homelessness and the impact that that's having on our community. And while we were looking at all sorts of solutions, we were able to focus more on youth homelessness, or we believe that youth homelessness is the area that we should be focusing on, based on the fact that the other three, while not in any less importance, are certainly being addressed through other methods within our community and our region. So I'm basically just saying that the report was well done. Again, I want to thank the experts that we were able to get, the interest that we were able to generate, and the solutions that we're hopefully going to make some strides towards later today. So that's all my opening comments.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on debate? Councillor Jolly, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to echo what Councillor Mackay said about the experts that were on this this task force. Incredible people. And what I said in committee a few weeks ago was I found the report quite disappointing, not because of the quality of the people. And it sounds like, even from answering questions today, it sounds like so many issues, important issues, were discussed, but they just didn't make it into the report. You know, I would have loved to see kind of, we talked about how to make sure non-binary people feel safe, but it wasn't in the report. We specifically don't want the city of St. Albert to operate this facility, but it was not in the report. So people who are sitting at the table, so Councillor Mackay, Mayor Heron, it sounds like you had a front row seat to see all these discussions, but for the rest of us, we just don't have access to that information, which is why I'm really struggling with some of these recommendations because of that lack of detail. So I'll probably support this because the report was submitted. It is what it is, but certainly the level of detail that we need to see for certainly supporting the types of recommendations that came out of this task force is really important for especially this kind of project that is so important to our community. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, anyone else on debate? Seeing none, anything to close, Councillor?
No, I appreciate the comments on enclosure. I mean, you're absolutely right, Councillor Jolly, pardon me. It was in need. I mean, I've been someone that's been involved with youth issues, youth crime, impacts of youth homelessness for many, many years. I still learn things in relation to this. And it is one of the, I guess, one of the limitations of task force, because I think, as we mentioned in committee, the report was much, much longer. And many people went through it and edited it down. And honestly, I wish we would have been able to have some of these individuals who spoke to the task force come and actually speak in front of council, because their stories are hard to believe and really heartbreaking that it happens in our community. So you're absolutely right. I wish we could, but I don't know how we could have done it any differently based on what the scope of the project was. So anyways, those are my closing comments.
All right, call for the vote. I see 6 yeses. There we go. All right, or 7, sorry. So that's unanimous. Second motion. I don't think you have to read it in because you've already read it in once, but this is a capital project charter one.
So, you know, when I was looking at kind of comments and then listening to some of the discussion, I mean, all great questions, and certainly all questions that we had, and potentially without reopening the entire every one of the agendas. I mean, certainly all of those questions and comments were raised in relation to that. And it was like, how do we move forward on this? And honestly, youth homelessness is a unique problem that requires unique strategies and responses. And our homeless youth come from highly needed but largely overlooked population of young men and women that are especially vulnerable to assault, theft, injury, illnesses, sexual exploitation. These youth, from my experience, they are usually fleeing abusive homes or are kicked out of their home for any number of reasons. Others have aged out of government care. I certainly have many examples of dealing with youth transitioning out of care and some of the issues that are, and the baggage, for lack of a better term, that many of these individuals struggle with, whether it's addictions, physical or mental disabilities, inability to hold down a job, lack of an education because they don't follow rules or the current rules of the system. And that brings them into the youth justice system. And one of the things that came home to me while we were doing this and through my history, I mean, being involved in law enforcement, policing, focusing so much of my career on youth, and then moving over to the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate and dealing with the impacts of a system that can't handle what's coming at them. I mean, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but we probably have over 7,000 youth currently in government care. And when you're dealing with that age group that is commonly referred to as teenagers or young adults, you got to realize they're no longer children, but they're not exactly adults. You know, many of these people who experience, many of these young people who experiences are dealing with families whose dad or mom have lost their jobs or being priced out of housing themselves. And if a young person is affected by, young people are affected by a parent's or caregiver's financial instability, and they experience that as just as well. But they're not in any position to know or implement solutions, and they're basically not available to access what little supports they do have. So, you know, one of the things that I've seen repeatedly in my career is that with these kids, and I'll call them kids, I know we have terms for them, unstable, I can't remember the exact term, but I'll get to it. I'm sure it'll come back to me. But, you know, when they lose their biological family, they seek out a family on the streets. And I see that all the time. And a lack of shelter, a safe room, and other services that may be not available in our city or even smaller towns surrounding us causes youth to gravitate into the larger center, and that's Edmonton. And they always almost show up at these centers. They have little or no resources. They've got no friends. They have no support network. They end up involved in the street culture. And once a youth ends up in street culture, I don't care if it's in the metropolis the size of Edmonton, there is a very small window of opportunity to access these kids and get them back. And if we don't, we are at peril of never getting them into a chronic homelessness situation. So these kids, they lack the skills necessary to live on their own. They come from homes or broken homes or situations that are so chaotic that they never learn things about even how to do the basic necessities that we think we teach our kids. And we can complain that my son doesn't pick up the garbage, or my son doesn't clean his room, or my son doesn't know how to do the laundry or prepare meals. That's the reality for these kids. They don't know how to do that. They don't have the structure in their lives to do that. They don't even have the education or the experience to even qualify for a minimum wage job. So this just sets them up for failure and to be manipulated and to be basically prey for predators that are living out there. So, I mean, a simple thing, and I wrote it down here. A simple thing is most of these kids don't even have identification documents. So they don't even know what services are available to them. One of the things that we've found when I worked in the Child and Youth Advocate's office was one of the very first things that we tried to do was make sure that we got them an identity, got them identity documents. But guess what you need to get an identity documents? You need an address. If you don't have an address, you don't qualify to get your documents. So when we talk about what are some of the services and what are some of the things that we need around there, is we need to identify a place, a safe place. So some of these kids that we can get and we can teach them and mentor them and give them the skills that some of these kids need, and we need to meet them where they are. And so if you call that harm reduction or if you call that prevention, but it's meeting some of these kids where they are, because they're, as I've said, they're carrying a lot of baggages. And I wrote something down. I mean, we're talking about the social and economic costs, and I don't really want to belabor some of that, but I mean, if you unstably connected, I just remembered that. Sorry, Karina. But I mean, if you think about it, so it costs in about 2012 dollars, costs about $30,000 to $40,000 a year to house a youth in a traditional shelter system. So if you put a kid in a youth remand center, and it's harder and harder nowadays to get a kid into youth remand, but if you do, it's $250 to $300 a day. That's way over $100,000 a year. So the socioeconomic cost of that just makes sense of trying to deal with prevention or harm reduction. So, I mean, if you look at it, homelessness is going to cost the federal government almost $4.5 billion this year. We've spent how many billions of dollars just looking at affordable housing? So I don't know, we talk about the fact, is this a municipal problem? Well, you know what? It's a society problem, and we're part of society. Our municipal government is part of society. So this isn't necessarily our responsibility, but we bear the brunt of the problem. We see the actual problems on our street, whether it's in our river valley, whether it's in our garage break and enters, whether it's in our youth crime, whether it's in our just kind of small kind of crime in our neighborhood, whether it's just disorder. We bear the brunt. So I realize, and I wish it wasn't our responsibility, but just like a lot of other things that get pushed down, we bear the responsibility. So all we're trying to do, the task force was saying is we see that this model works in other communities. Katrina identified a number of different examples. We don't know what is an exact fit for St. Albert yet. It might look like something like is in another municipality, whether it's Lethbridge, whether it's in Grand Prairie. I've seen, just to answer some of the questions that came up, I've seen models work with a split house, and what they do is they go out and they buy a duplex and they knock the wall down in between them a little bit, and they have girls and women on one side, boys and young men on the other side. They have a staff on both sides. Never the twain shall meet unless there is an actual service that they provide. It works very well with two staff. They sometimes only have one staff at night. There's lots of models out there, but we don't know what's right for us. So all we're asking with this recommendation is that this moves forward to the process. I'm not asking anybody to approve what it looks like. I don't need to know what the operations are. That's not the discussion for today. Right now, all I want to know, or all I want to push through, is this an opportunity that we can actually have staff build a project starter that will identify what does it look like within our community. And it might be, I even identify the partner we want to work with. I might identify the model we want to work with. And it might, it might come back as not being something we can support because, damn it, we're in a pandemic. And there's other things that are going to have to rise as much as this is important. There's other things. I was going to say Trump, but I don't ever want to use that word. But there's going to have to be some decisions made. But for right now, I want to just see if we can move on. That's all I'm asking for by putting it forward in this motion. So I pulled it off consent because I thought, as you can tell from my soapbox, I thought that this was important to say and it shouldn't be on consent. I thought it needed to be as important to say and to bring out and high profile it. And that's why I brought it off consent. So sorry for being so long, but I think it's extremely important topic that we needed to bring forward.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Hanson and then Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay, for pulling this off consent. Obviously, I can hear the passion in your voice about this. For 6 years, I sat concurrently on the Provincial School Boards Association, as well as the Child and Family Services Authority for the Edmonton and area. And while one was Children's Services and one was Alberta School Boards, much of the conversation at both levels was the same. And it always came back to the vulnerable youth. And what we really learned, especially at the CFSA board, was that when kids age out of a system, and we have way too many kids in the system, they have no supports. And so at the school board side, you'd see that there's a lot of absenteeism and you don't know why. You don't know what's happening with them at home. You don't know even if they're home or if they're couch surfing or where they are. And on the Child and Family Services side of things, if they do get put into the system, they're cut off at the age of 18. Sometimes it goes longer. So how is a kid supposed to go out and find a job? How is a kid supposed to find a mentor to help them along? There is no other place to go. There's no place to go unless you find a gang or you find a group of people that you feel support you. And if that's not a positive step, and I go back to the 40 assets remember the 40 developmental assets that we had in this city? It's about having assets. And I see this transitional youth home, if it ever comes to fruition, as a place for kids to come in who are literally lost for whatever reason, and it's not our business what those reasons are. But they need to get their education back. They need to get their resumes on track. They need to get an address. They need to be able to find supports. And this is a transitional home. This is not going to be a place, in my mind, and of course, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like if it ever works. This is not going to be a forever home for them. This is transitional. This means we support you and we work with you to find the specific needs that you require to make a go of it. And I'll tell you, I met so many kids on that CFSA board who really wanted to do well. Really, but they just didn't have people or systems or help to support them. And so, for me, this is an absolute no-brainer. And I would really like to see a capital project come forward on this. We can say that St. Albert may not have as many homeless youth as another city, but that isn't the point. The point is we have to support our youth going forward when they can't be supported elsewhere. And no, it's not all municipal, and it shouldn't be all municipal. It's societal, just as Councillor Mackay said. And societal means that we look after our youth. And when we have kids who have assets, developmental assets, hopefully closer to the 40, then we've got kids that are going to do well. And if we don't, then we're going to have kids that are going to cost us. Not only cost us in financial dollars, but cost us in society. And so this is, to me, just a huge investment in people that will have lots of return on investment later on. And we used to use this, what did we used to use, Councillor Mackay, though? For $1 of prevention, you get $7 back. And so, and those numbers were used back in 2013. So it's more now. So I guess I am so supportive of this. I'm fully supportive of this. I think if we can advocate and get the funds that we need and do this right, the needs, the individual needs of our kids, that we will go a long way in creating a good future for our kids. And if they know they're supported and know that they can go there, we've opened the door to opportunity. And when kids have opportunities, they soar. So I guess that's my soapbox for the day, but you have my full support.
Thank you. I have Councillor Watkins, Councillor Hughes, and then Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, I'm going to support it too. The youth, our youth are our most important people. And, you know, it sounds corny, but they are the future, because they are the people who are going to lead this nation here and lead our society here in the coming years. And they have a very complicated life with all this internet and social media. And they're trying to balance all this social media with school and trying to get an education and trying to find a job, trying to find their way out of their parents' house in some ways. And sometimes they need a safe place. And I have a lot of experience with this, not from Councillor Mackay's point of view, but just from opening my doors of my house to youth who needed a place to stay. And my sons are 25, 27, and 29. And I've had my nephew who was 14 in my house who was put in a juvie home and they needed someplace to put him. I had my best friend's daughter who needed a place to stay. I had one of my friends whose apartment house burnt down and the fire out in the north side, and they needed a place to stay and they came to my house. And right now I have a young man who's 24 years old in my basement who's from Jane and Finch, Toronto. And he's living at my house because he's trying to get away from the violence and the bull crap that he's seen. His sister's seen 2 people shot in the head. He's seen 1 person murdered right next door to his house. And I'm not saying St. Albert is anywhere near this, but I have opened my doors to a lot of kids. And he asked me, he said, why do you let me stay here for free, RW? He calls me RW. And I said, because you need a hand up and you need a chance to get out of what you're in. So I think we owe it to the people to look at this. And this is not a, sorry, I'm getting emotional about this. This is not a halfway house for kids getting out of jail or anything like that. This is a place for transition to try to help kids get a hand up. And as Councillor Mackay said, you know, we're trying to help these kids because they are the future. They have nowhere to go, and they are the most vulnerable in society. And if we don't look after them, who is? So we live in a very rich community here. We have a lot of money in this community. I'm hopeful that we can find a way that people in this community, if we just need one house, that somebody can give up a house and we can find a way to operate this thing and get it going. So I'm all supportive of it. Just because we happen to do a business case doesn't mean that we're spending $650,000 or we're doing anything. We're just trying to do more study in it and to help some people who need a lot of help. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. And don't worry about getting emotional. Councillor Jolly, Councillor Hughes, and Councillor Mackay witnessed it at the committee level. Councillor Hughes, you're up next.
Thank you. Well, I supported this at the committee level. I really think that supporting the idea of having a homeless, safe place to go and agreeing to the process that we're doing, I think are 2 different things. So the concerns that I have right now is that I still maintain, regardless of what the committee is recommending, that we should have an idea of what the partnerships are and what the model would look like, and not just have us prescribe one and then see if we can find someone to fit into our cookie cutter. And right now we're just coming up with an idea, and it may not be the idea that's actually worthwhile for any of the people who could be partnerships towards it, or how much it would cost for the partnerships, any of that. So the idea of coming up with a solution and then trying to figure out who's going to be able to either run it, contribute to it, or anything else seems to be backwards to me. And that's the real thing. It's not about whether or not you want to solve the problem. It's whether or not you're not actually going to solve it because you're going down one train, and the ultimate solution that might be remotely affordable is a different one. And we don't know how much the capital costs will be on this. A 10-bedroom house is going to be very expensive, well into the millions to be able to manage all of that. It's not just going to be a couple $100,000 as a solution. So even the cost of 650,000, it really depends on who the partnerships are. And so I think that what we actually should be doing is finding the provincial funding, finding the partnerships, finding out what their solutions are. I think that the solution that Councillor Watkins brought forward regarding affordable housing options and having an ROI and having those type of discussions would be a far better solution than trying to find the solution, then figure out how we're going to pay for it. Especially because this is a very emotional topic, this is more likely to lead to moving forward at any cost, regardless of consequences. And I think we should be looking at what the real options are before we start figuring out which solution you want to pay for, especially considering that we're in a massive financial crisis right now, trying to figure out how we're even going to handle our current budget levels before we do more. So to me, that's really the concerns that I have here, is that we don't know the real costs, we don't know the potential partnerships, we don't know the limitations of anything, and yet we're going to find a solution. I mean, that just doesn't seem to make any sense. So at this point, in spite of the fact that I agree there should be a solution, I don't think that the solution that's been brought forward to date is necessarily the solution that's going to actually achieve the goal you're trying to achieve without spending a lot of money, and we don't even know how much that's going to be. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, certainly when this came forward today, I was puzzled that there was some debate about it, but in any case, there are a few things that bring greater meaning to being an elected official than be able to speak on behalf of those in need. And I think that's what we're doing here. Quite honestly, I recognize the financial difficulty that not only St. Albert is in, but municipalities and other orders of government are as well. But that doesn't mean that we turn our back on the issues that are so necessary of being supported. Having said all of that, I will be looking forward to the project charter going forward to just assess, to make sure that our efforts will reap the rewards that we're seeking to find here at the end of this. So I too am very thankful for the debate that's happened here. We need to be able to stand up and speak passionately about those things that are near and dear to our heart. That's why we ran, and that's why we got elected. And so thank you, Councillor Mackay, for doing this, and Madam Mayor for setting up the homelessness task force in the first place. And quite honestly, yeah, it may be the requirement of other orders of government to come alongside in order to make a big dent in our problems. But in order to address them, it's one day at a time, one step at a time, and $1 at a time. And I think this is a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. So Councillor Watkins, I always cry when talking about homelessness in St. Albert, so you're not alone there. So I, you know, as someone who has had 2 members of their immediate family be homeless in St. Albert, one of whom died while homeless in St. Albert, certainly this is a passionate issue for me, but I would echo what Councillor Hughes has said, in that this plan just, it's not a plan. If this had come forward similar to Councillor Watkins' motion about affordable housing, kind of recommending that we reach out to existing bodies saying, hey, bring us forward your plans, I would jump all over that. I think that's really the way to go with this issue. Certainly it's frustrating. Councillor Mackay mentioned the issues with downloading of higher levels of government and how much this is going to cost the provincial government, the federal government, and yet it's municipalities who are talking about it, which is incredibly frustrating. So certainly this is an important issue. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. But just looking at kind of what is in front of us on paper, not kind of people's interpretation of what it is, I'm not prepared to support this at this time. Thank you.
All right, I'm not going to go too detailed because I said a lot at committee. To just kind of address what Councillor Jolly said about reaching out to the agencies for their ideas. That's exactly what the task force was. We had Mustard Seed and James Spady there. We talked to UCAN. We talked, I can't remember the other one. Chew, that's what it was. Thank you. So we've actually done that consultation already. And this is the recommendation that's in front of us. And I'm so glad it's actually focused on the youth. I get excited that we could maybe be preventing some chronic homeless issues if we can help these kids at a younger age. And, you know, I'm not going to go into a lot of debate because I've already said my piece on this. So I'm just going to pass it over to you, Councillor Mackay.
I had bets with Councillor Hanson how long you would last before the waterworks. I know this is passionate for you, and I appreciate the comments, and I really realize, and I appreciate all the comments, and I realized and I'm the biggest one that talks about the devil in the details, and believe me, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Jolly, there are a lot that is in the details that we don't have in front of us. And if we were actually approving a plan right now, it's very short on details, but the problem isn't. The problem is here. And if we're waiting until a young person in St. Albert becomes homeless and then we intervene, we've waited too long. The longer they're out, the longer they're homeless, the worse their outcomes. And you know, whether it's a program that strengthens families and then offers mentorship and early intervention, even in schools, as well as maybe providing them a safe place to stay so that they can actually start to learn some of life skills that maybe some of us were very fortunate to have, then we're going to accomplish the goals. And whether we do it with the cart leading the horse, or whether we do it in a structured manner, and I'm still confident that the capital business case will come back with a structured process, and it might even include, as suggested, coming back with an EOI with a defined problem and looking at solutions. But one of the things I do know from working with kids is you got to meet them where they're at. And if you're not going to do that, you're not going to have any success. So that's all I have to say. And I never teared up. Almost did, but thank you very much.
Sorry, call for the vote. So I've got Mayor Herron in favor, Councillor Hanson in favor, Councillor Jolly against, Councillor Mackay in favor, Councillor Broadhead in favor, Councillor Watkins in favor. Is that everyone? Did I miss anyone?
You missed me, Kathy.
Councillor
I'm
Hughes.
against.
Why don't I see you on the list? Okay, Councillor Hughes is in. Oh, as against, down at the bottom. Thank you. Sorry about that, Councillor Hughes. All right, so that's 5-2. Third motion.
That the mayor's task force continue to support the coordination of homelessness prevention strategies among local, regional, provincial, and national organizations, as well as the public and private sectors.
Okay, I've already got
Just the only thing that comes out of this one and this recommendation, and it's going back to committee, is and we've talked about it, where we've had all these experts and we've basically used all of their expertise and all of their connections and all of their passion for the issue. And guess what? They're community residents. They live in our community, they care about our community, and they want to stay involved in our community. And so when we looked at, okay, what comes next? Do we stand down the committee? Do we stand down the task force? Pardon me, not a committee, it's a task force. We thought, wow, why would we do that when we have an opportunity to basically tap into this ongoing expertise and willingness to participate in the community that they live in and care so much about, just like all of us do. So that's the intent behind the motion or recommendation, pardon me. Not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. I will absolutely support this, but I wonder if there's a friendly in here is there any way we could add the word advocacy somewhere in there? So it says something like that the mayor's task force continues to support and advocate for the coordination of homelessness. It gives it a little bit more action and direction. Or do we wait for the capital project to be presented to us and then I guess I'm thinking it's never too soon to get started when we're talking about these things. So I wonder if that's a friendly to you.
Councillor Mackay? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a friendly, and it's separate actually from the capital project charter. I mean, part of that the desire was to stay involved. So, I mean, so absolutely. I mean, they advocate heavily in their current roles, but certainly to actually bring them in together and say we're part of a mayor's task force and advocacy is one of their roles. We might as well put it in there because I don't even know whether the current terms of reference would continue to apply, but I mean, that's something we'll have to look at.
So it's going to read that the mayor's task force continue to support and advocate the coordination. Is that what
Mayor Herron, I would just like to the committee specifically remove that word. So I don't know. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Council now, and if
Yeah,
Councillor
we do.
Mackay wants
Thank
it
you.
as a-
Well, just in terms of Councillor Mackay is presenting as chair, right?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Councillor Jolly, because I didn't remember that, but you're right. We did have that discussion over that and we did remove it at that point. Although Councillor Jolly, I cannot remember for the life of me as to the discussion as to
Okay,
why.
so are you taking it as a friendly?
I'll take it as a friendly, but
Okay.
with all regrets to Councillor Jolly, I can't remember the conversation.
Okay,
as
maybe
to
when
why.
in debate you can remind.
Yeah.
us.
And I'll wait for.
Okay, so do you have anything else on debate?
No, and if it hadn't been taken as friendly, I would have asked for an amendment.
Okay. All right, is there any more in debate on this? Seeing none, I'll just add that we don't want to let these skilled and knowledgeable people go quite yet. So I do know there's a lot of work to be done, especially I think on advocating to get funding from the provincial government as one of the 7 cities. We want to be like one of the 8 cities, or we want Homeward Trust to allow money to funnel from the Edmonton city into St. Albert. And I think most likely Edmonton would be supportive of that as well. So nothing further.
I've got nothing further.
Call for the vote. So I'll go down the list. Mayor Herron in favor, Councillor Jolly opposed, Councillor Hanson in favor, Councillor Hughes in favor, Councillor Broadhead in favor, and Councillor Watkins in favor. Well, and Mackay's in favor, sorry. So 6-1. All right, now did you want to bring the fourth one forward?
I'll bring the other one forward. I did send it to Ledge Services earlier, but I can read it in if you want, Cheryl.
Yes, please.
That an operating business case be developed to be considered as part of the 2021 budget process for a social housing coordinator position to advance the social housing needs of all vulnerable groups in St. Albert as per the recommendations of the Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness.
So this is the exact same motion that was in front of committee that did not pass. Is that it?
Yes.
All right. We'll accept that. Actually, before I do that, any questions on this? Go ahead, Councillor Broadhead.
So legislatively, how does this play in light of our procedure bylaw? Is the chair allowed to bring forward a defeated motion from a committee?
Yes, I believe so, but yeah. Any member of council. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So
Okay.
committee is definitely different than council as a whole. Fair enough.
Okay, so I see no questions, so I'm going to accept your motion. Councillor Mackay, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe Councillor Watkins can refresh our memories because I remember one thing was defeated at committee and he brought it forward and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. I apologize. But I mean, this goes and during our committee meeting and during our discussion with the task force members, I mean, certainly there's a lot of concern in relation to identifying a particular staffing person, and you heard it in some of the questions. So this is around some of the capacity issues. And again, I got to preface this all that all I'm asking for in this recommendation or in motion is that an operating business case be developed, and that position, whether go through the process as part of the 2021 budget to look at whether or not it is a priority and how does it move forward. And that's all I'm doing based on just kind of the pureness of the recommendations coming forward out of the task force. I think the need is there. I mean, we spoke about some of the challenges that we have around advocacy, around coordination, around just the ability to identify what's important for our community. So certainly as a position that lives or certainly works and understands our community, knows our community needs best. And if we put it on a corner of somebody else's desk, for lack of a better word, or job description, we potentially lose an opportunity to identify a lot of what some of the concerns were, whether it's operating grants, whether it's opportunities to partner with other agencies or other communities, or look at some of the leading edge best practices that are out there. So I think that having somebody that's dedicated towards looking at some of the social housing needs from all the vulnerable groups, and whether that's in conjunction with the affordable housing person or whether the affordable housing position starts to morph into something, that's for the decision of the operating business case. It's not for me to determine kind of what the details are in relation to that. But when this was brought forward by the task force, certainly they identified the importance of the issues facing all of the vulnerable groups in our community, not just youth, but all the other ones that were identified in the project, whether it's seniors, whether it's domestic violence victims or victims of intimate partner violence, or whether it's LGBTQ, or whether it's non-binary, whether it's whatever it is, or whoever it is. What are the challenges? And it would be a big task. It would be huge. And to put it on the, or to not even deal with it or not even identify it, I mean, that goes back to the fact that we miss an opportunity to intervene earlier and have some sort of an impact on some of the challenges facing our vulnerable populations, no matter who they are in our community. So all I'm asking for by bringing this forward is some reconsideration. And I completely understand with some of the discussion we had at committee and why this didn't move forward at committee, but I think that I wanted to bring it forward to full discussion and debate at council. So those are my opening comments.
Thank you. I see Councillor Hughes' hand up and then Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. I think I'm guessing Councillor Jolly is feeling the same level of frustration as I am right now. I'm really not sure what went on at the committee level, since we're actually just ignoring it all. And I'm having an issue with the chair bringing forward recommendations that don't reflect the committee's recommendations. Because basically those recommendations were not brought forward as is. So that's an issue for me. But on top of that, the reason why I voted against it then, and I'm going to vote against it again, is that, first of all, we have a limited number of resources. But second of all, when I ask the questions of what they're doing, this sounds like affordable housing issues as opposed to homeless housing issues. And we have an affordable housing coordinator who right now has 0 affordable housing projects. We have SAFE to help people who have domestic violence, fleeing for domestic violence, and help them try to find places to go. We have an FCSS staff department that handles all sorts of the type of issues that were brought forward just a few minutes ago. And so while this is really not a position that one person can handle by themselves, that what was brought forward was way more issues than what one person's expertise could actually fall into. So you need to have multiple people with multiple levels of expertise to handle the different areas that needed to be addressed. But as far as affordable housing goes, we have an affordable housing person. So I look at this and I think there's going to be duplication. A lot of the job description was very vague. The specifics, I think, could be handled in the current staffing. And when I look at the fact that this one issue, which no one disclosed at the previous election, that was brought forward now, if this goes forward with between the 650,000 and then another 100,000 for this, we're at $750,000 annual before capital, we'll actually be getting more money from the city than all the outside agencies put together. That's a substantial commitment that we are suddenly making on this. But I really believe that we can address the issues much clearer with what we have with current staffing. And until we actually would see specifics, because everything was much too general, that I don't want to be putting another $100,000 into something which does not necessarily have to be spent. I don't think that one person can solve the domestic violence issues. They cannot solve people fleeing from that, or any of the other seniors issues. Those are going to be going, we can go to the senior centers and address it through there and give them funding if they required it. But we don't have to have one person who can handle all of that. One person can't catch all of everything. It just can't. It's a bureaucratic position. It's not going to be somebody who can actually go there and find the people. That's a wholly different level of organization and people that would actually address those problems. So for those reasons, I'm not going to be supporting this today.
Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. I'm wondering from a process point of view if this would have been a little bit cleaner if we brought it forward as a notice of motion. But we've been cleared by legislative services and the chair's accepted it, so we're in debate now. So here we are. I support this motion, mostly because I think that this is kind of what we're coming to terms with a little bit. We totally haven't landed on it yet at the recovery task force, the COVID-19 recovery task force. We're talking about social hubs, and we're talking about recovery, and we're talking about what it means to recover through a pandemic, and what are the social issues that we're starting to face. And of course, we're still new, and we're grappling with strategies and things that we need to do for this community to rebuild. We're not approving anything today except for the possibility of a coordinator. So given the fact that this is aligning with our recovery task force in terms of our social issue needs, I think it's prudent that it gets put on the books for further discussion. So I'm fully supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just see if there's anyone else registered. No, I'll just say a couple words. I think there's some big misunderstanding about the difference between a social housing coordinator and affordable housing coordinator. And I actually take offense that it was suggested that our affordable housing coordinator is not bringing forward any projects. Because Councillor Watkins put a motion on the floor a while ago to do an EOI on a piece of land in St. Albert, and that person has been working very hard to get that project underway. So, and that's a position in our planning department dealing with our land use bylaw and zoning. Social housing coordinator would be a position under community support development, and it's completely different. So, you know, this is a business case only, as it's been pointed out. And Mr. Scoble, to you, I would say, I would expect this to not come forward as an automatically in the budget business like position if you didn't believe it was worthwhile. So I would expect it to go through your rigor and your process. And if it fails, then we can try again at budget. But just because it might pass today doesn't mean it's an automatic. So I would expect the rigor that you would normally do. So Councillor Mackay, thank you for bringing this forward. I know it's the privilege of any member of council to bring forward any motion that does not get approved at committee. So just because you're the chair doesn't mean you couldn't have done it. Wes could have done it if he believed in it. So I appreciate you bringing it forward. Thank you. Nothing further. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just thought I was just following the process approved by council when we set up the committee. So I apologize if anybody takes offense to that. I did look at bringing this forward as a notice of motion, but then looking at the timeframes, plus also because I wasn't asking for an actual establishment of a housing coordinator position. I was asking for the preparation of an operating business case to be considered as part of the 2021 budget. I even looked at bringing it forward as a postponed motion in the budget, but that, in my opinion, that wouldn't give administration enough time to actually be able to actually build the business case. So I just took it forward as part of a recommendation that went in front of the committee. And I respect my fellow committee members and their opinions on it. I'm just using the process that's available to bring it forward in relation to having a discussion in front of full council. And so in closing, all I'm looking for is that we move forward on an operating business case that will go before SLT through the normal process. And as Mayor Herron said, it may not make it to the top. There may be other, I have no idea how this will compete against another priority in our staffing needs, or if we're even able to have new positions this year based on our current economic situation. But it's worthy of the discussion, and that's why I'm bringing it forward. And I'm familiar with the roles of advocacy. I had people that worked for me in my other organization, and there's no doubt these people wear capes. They are superhuman in what they can do, but it is a big job. So that's all I'm asking for right now, is that we open it up, look for an operating business case, and whether it comes back in front of us at budget, that's really part of the process.
All right, call for the vote. All right, I have Mayor Herron in favor, Councillor Hanson in favor, Councillor Jolly against, Councillor Mackay in favor, Councillor Hughes against, Councillor Broadhead in favor, and Councillor Watkins in favor. So that's 5-2. All right, moving on, was next thing on the agenda was 7.3, Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee, just the minutes and the agenda package for your leisurely reading. Then we had the solar farm, which is 7.4, pulled off of consent by Councillor Hughes. Do we have a second presentation on this, Mr. Scoble? I saw Kate. Oh, she's there on the screen now. Okay.
Yeah, Kate's available.
Did you want to do a presentation?
We can do a presentation, or we can take questions, whatever council wishes.
Councillor Hughes, you pulled it off. Would you like to see the presentation, or do you just have questions?
I just expected questions right now.
Anyone else want to
Whatever.
presentation?
Anybody else?
Okay, I'm seeing no hands going up for the presentation. So Councillor Hughes, ask your questions.
Okay. Now, Kate, I don't have the file in front of me right now, so we're going to be doing part of this on memory, but I'm going to go through this. I have a couple quick questions on this. So when I looked at the numbers, I was looking at how much the revenue was coming in on year 2, because that's when it's fully operational, is year 2, right? So the energy was coming in at 792,000, I think, and change. So, and that was on the energy production costs. So what were we assuming we were selling that at? What was the selling price, expected selling price for the energy at, for that one?
Just give me 1 second. I'm just pulling up the
Okay.
tables right now.
I'm gonna do the same thing.
The CI that I sent you guys, I'd like to say the better part of a week and a half ago, goes into the tables that were attributed to the costing, what it's anticipated that solar panels generate, etc. It's not, it doesn't function like a spreadsheet does in terms of how we generate revenues. It's done through sort of a base level modeling, because the price of electricity fluctuates, as it is a complicated situation to project. So you use the tables provided by the regulator, and how and when solar panels are able to produce, because they obviously can't produce during the evening hours, they produce during the daytime hours, etc. So it's not 100% as simple as just giving a price. So just let me pull it up. Sorry, my Excel is very slow. Yeah, so it's, I can't give you a number per se because it doesn't tell me specifically what the model generates. We use the model that's provided by the regulator, input the size of the solar panel, and it provides the generalized energy value that you're going to achieve over an annual period based on your location throughout Alberta. So I don't have a flat rate that I have for you. Sorry, Councillor Hughes.
Okay, so I'm just trying to, okay, we're going on 1,244 kilowatt hours per year is what that's what I saw in your, right?
Yep.
Yeah, on average, right?
Yep.
Which is reasonable. It's similar to what was being produced in Edmonton. And I understand in transit, we did 1,022 last year. So give or take 10% or so. But so is the energy that's being listed here just the cost for selling it? Or is there something else in the energy revenue line? Or is it is it just the sales cost?
Just the sales cost of energy, that's it. And generally with solar, you would want to work on developing partnerships of who you're specifically selling it to, because you can sell it at a premium. That's really common. I didn't build that into the model whatsoever because I haven't even done any of those conversations. And I think that would be a little bit presumptuous to make that assumption.
So when I'm looking at, I think when we had the conversation last month, you said that the range for selling it into the grid was between 1.8 and 3 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what I remember. And I look at what, like Brooks, for example, they have a 5 megawatt and they're selling at 3.7 cents a kilowatt hour. So the concern I'm having, go ahead.
No, so it depends how Brooks is selling. So there's different ways of selling to the grid. If you are, let's say you're transit, for instance, and you're a behind the meter project. So you supply your facility first and then you sell back to the grid with your excess power. That's at a different rate than what you do if you exclusively sell to the grid. So I don't know 100% what Brooks setup looks like. I did have the chance to connect with 3 other municipalities. We sent feelers out to about half a dozen or so, but just because of summer breaks, people weren't around. So we heard back from Banff, Canmore, and the city of Leduc in terms of the operation of their solar facilities. Now, Banff has over 50 arrays in their facility. And they basically said, as you get bigger, your performance goes up because there's less losses in your system. So when they were projecting a 20 to 25-year payback on many of their arrays, they're seeing about a 10-year payback to the Banff taxpayer. City of Leduc is an example. They were originally projecting a $56,000 revenue or cost avoidance because theirs are behind the meter systems. They're seeing right now $160,000 a year of cost avoidance in power. So they are overproducing than what was on the market because what's the tables that are available for use in modeling right now are older technologies. And as every year progresses, the technology gets better and just the systems get better, but there's just not the modeling technology to incorporate those values today.
So are either one of those two doing the modeling that we're suggesting? Like, because you said that the second one was a cost avoidance, which obviously you can avoid more costs than what you can do if you sell it onto the grid. So are either one of those two doing what we're doing in their systems?
So they did what we have done at both PW and at Transit. They are smaller arrays. So Leduc and Banff, they are smaller arrays than what we're producing. So they're behind the meter. So they're supplying their facilities first, and then the grid after. The actual cost the revenue possibilities with those types of facilities are actually less than what we have the potential with just feeding the system. So what we're suggesting is something similar to what EIA is doing, something that's just feeding the grid. So what EIA announced about a month ago now. So they had kind of projected, so the city of Leduc had projected that they were going to avoid 56,000 or so a year in one of their arrays, and what they're actually seeing is 160,000. So they're overproducing than what they originally projected. So their power bills are down 160,000-ish.
Right. And that's really dependent on what you're saving. It's basically cost savings as opposed to generation of revenue.
That's
because you're just not. Yeah. Okay. So, because this is the thing I'm trying to figure out, is that when I take 792,000, divide it by 5 megawatts and divide it by 1,244, you have to get over 12 cents a kilowatt hour to generate that. So I'm trying to figure out how we would get 12 cents a kilowatt hour.
Well, it's not, it's about selling at peak demand. So that is, so when you're an industry, you are buying most of your power during lunchtime, give or take. So, between 10 and 3, when all your people are using everything. And that's when power trades at its highest amount. Now, a resident, so a normal house, just has a fixed rate generally that they're using on a monthly basis. But when you have big users out there, and what you're able to sell to the grid for as a major supplier is different. So you sell at the variable rate, which is different.
And so is the variable rate on, I mean, first of all, the variable rate will only count for those, the high peak number will only be 2 hours a day, right? So the other hours a day would not get that. But
Well, it's
are we
actually, so the variable rate looks like a bell curve.
Yeah.
If you like,
Uh-huh.
so that between 10 and 3 is basically when the top of your bell curve is, and then it goes down from there. So when you and I in our homes use the majority of our power kind of at breakfast and at dinner is when power is the cheapest. So that's why you turn your lights off when you go to work. Versus when we are able to sell to the grid from a solar system perspective. But so what I'm just proposing at this point, Councillor Hughes, because I only have access to kind of the base level modeling for something this big, it's spend some money, do the feasibility, do the detailed design, and get the information that provides us the efficiencies of panels and what the possibilities are for the city of St. Albert. Because I can't attest to know that right now.
No, but I'm trying to figure out how we got the $792,436. Because if it's just the energy, when I do the math, it's just breaking it down, we have to have an average cost of selling it at 12.7 cents a kilowatt hour. And I'm not aware of anywhere in the grid that's buying that at that rate. So is that what you used for your calculations?
I didn't use that number, no. I used a model that provided the output based on how big we are, based on how big of a 5 megawatt array at each particular stage. So no, I didn't use it. I used the data from the regulator, and it provided the output of that particular number.
Okay. And I know I keep asking you, and for some reason it just keeps escaping my mind. So you have to send it to me in writing so I can just refer to it. I swear, Kate.
Okay.
The D32, that's like, because it's not, I interpreted D32 when I keep thinking about it is the amount that you would not be putting into the grid if you're using an offset like we are for public works or for transit. I'm trying to figure out how the D32 would work considering we're only putting it into the grid.
So it actually doesn't apply to kind of the transit and public works facilities. What it does is, so I'm going to compare it to something a little more visual. So we have our own internal water reservoirs in the city of St. Albert, right? We've got 3 throughout the city. And then we have this big thing called EPCOR that's a ways away that we use that gives us water. Worst case, if we run into high water demands, we can pull from EPCOR. We pay a premium for it, but we can pull from EPCOR. So there's this giant reservoir out in the world that we have access to, if need be, right? So now compare that to power. We get, by feeding the grid during peak period, the residents, like the people that are connected to the grid, don't need to access the power pool. So the big EPCOR, like the big power pool that's out in the ether, during that peak period, because we're providing extra energy during that peak period. What is required through legislation is there is a credit that the power pool has to apply by legislation to a supplier like us, for the amount of extra energy we are able to sell to the grid so that the power pool isn't required to be accessed by users.
Okay. And I appreciate this, only the 15th time you've had explained to me, I swear.
It's okay.
And I'll probably forget tomorrow morning, but I will try to remember, honest to God. Okay. And then
I'll try and find a way to turn it into a character so it's a little bit more visual for you.
I got it. It just sometimes I forgot, but I think I've got it now. And then the carbon value, what basis of carbon credits were we assuming? What's the tonnage, I guess, or the carbon credit value that we're assuming on that assumption?
Give me 1 second. So the other piece that would go into doing all the calculations for this from a feasibility and detailed design is typically on a project of this scale, you have a variable team, one of which is an expert in carbon trading and has access to those types of understanding of kind of, I'll say that market, because it is a very specialized skill. And that would provide that extra certainty and that insight into what that looks like. In terms of the actual credit, like the actual carbon value, carbon dollars. Offset revenue. Hold on one second, sorry.
Okay.
So you end up with roughly over the course of a year, about 7,000 tons of carbon.
And what is, I guess I wasn't wondering what, okay, I could do math, but I don't have this many extra screens on here. How much was it per tonnage is where we assuming the credit was for? Was it for $30 a ton, or that's what I was wondering?
Yeah, it is. So in that CI that was sent August 7th, it goes through the tables that were provided by the regulators. So right now it trades at about $30 a ton, and the offset value that you're able to kind of put forward is $9.71.
Okay. I had one more question and now it's left my brain. So just give me one more second here. Oh, do we have somebody who can do the trading for this carbon credit on staff right now?
No, we do not. It is
So that
pretty
would
common
actually
though.
be part-
It is pretty common that this is outsourced as a component of the project. We have done carbon calculations within environment for the last few years, and it's something that we generally outsource to a consultant just because the reporting is so specific. So it's currently in our workflow today.
Okay. I'm fully expecting this to go forward. So, but what I would like to see in this business case specifically is the maintenance costs really be evaluated. I don't see anything in there for the cost, the outsourcing for this. I don't see anything for the cost for how much the person's selling it on the grid back and forth. The ongoing cost to sell this, I understand, is also not just a one and done. And also the costs for replacement of parts and maintenances, such as inverters, that sort of thing that can break down. There's no costs in there included in our maintenance costs. So
yeah, so generally, like inverters have generally a 9-year warranty on them. So you do have a solid warranty on your inverters. Your panels right now, you can, it's pretty common to get a 25-year warranty on panel performance. So at year 24, if you saw kind of a 50% reduction in your panel performance, you can basically get a new panel. And that's common in industry right now. So you have the expectation inverters are 9 years, panels are 25 based on the warranties that we can get in Alberta today. But yeah, it'll definitely be things that the business case will look at. Again, that's the intention, is to really reduce the risk by doing some detailed work and having solid numbers with kind of specific Synology data to go behind them.
yeah, so that's one of the things I'd just really be interested in seeing, I guess, Kate, is just those specifics. So if we say these are all the parts, this is how long the warranty is, this is how long we should expect to replace 25% of them after 10 years, something like that, and it's included in our ongoing costs. That's what I'm looking for, is those details, so that we haven't overlooked something, I guess, for that, and that it's clear, so I don't have to keep bugging you guys for it. I realize this is just to ask to have it, but I'm telling you now so that I don't have to ask for it later when we don't have it.
No, you bet. And it'll be easier at that point if we do go forward to have the consultants come and do a presentation. So there's a back and forth and all the details can be provided.
Okay. I think I'm done with questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I've got Councillor Mackay has some questions.
Thank you, Kate. Great answers to some really good questions. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I guess mine's more of a process, and I guess if following on Councillor Hughes's request for what she's looking for in the business case, would part of the business case also identify basically private partnerships? I know during your presentation, certainly at the Recovery Task Force, you did talk about some of the pros and cons and some of the, some of the challenges around that. Would you include potentially involving private partnerships or partnerships with other potential utility companies that are currently working on solar?
Currently, that's not in my workflow. The business case that you see, as conceptual as it is, was based on the city making the investment and the city achieving the revenues off the bottom end. So it doesn't right now. And it's at this point, it would be challenge. I know there's partnerships out there. I know there's people that would love to do partnerships with us, but we'd obviously want to go through a formal RFP process to go through a partnership process, which would be completely kind of additional stream on top of the feasibility and detailed design that we would be projecting to go through right now. So maybe an additional step if you were looking for that.
Well, I think to get some of the impacts. I mean, why? I mean, if there's opportunities, why would we necessarily negate them, or why would we not investigate them? Not negate them, but why would we not investigate something where we could? I mean, I realize that this, as prepared, potentially makes some financial sense, but there's also potentially risk. And if we can share that risk, why wouldn't we look at that? I mean, I realize that obviously has impact on our revenue, but potentially it also mitigates some of the risk. So is there an easier way Mr. Scoble, is there some way we can do that as I don't know whether it's an addendum or whether it's just a kind of a cursory look? I mean, I mean, we're spending a lot of money potentially looking at something. Why wouldn't we look at all alternatives?
Through the chair. So, well, you summed it up very well there, right? Like there's a hedging here. So the more investors, the more the sharing of risk, but also the more the sharing of the reward, right? So it's certainly something that can be looked at if that's something council's interested in. I guess we would need to, understand if that's where you want to go. We can certainly do it. But again, it's the hedging of the risk and the reward.
Sorry, I apologize. I just don't think we have a complete report if we don't also include all the other options available. I realize, that right now the scope is what it is, but I would be myself personally, I can only speak for myself. I would be interested in saying if there's some potential and realizing the reward is also has to be shared, but that's just my personal opinion. The second question I have, Madam Mayor.
If I can add to that though, Councillor Mackay, is there are opportunities out there to partnership. I can tell you that with certainty because I've since this went to committee, I probably should have quit my day job with the number of times my phone has rang from people. So the possibilities are there. They're just examining the possibilities of different investment and reward sharing would be very different and a different different connections than the folks that would go through the feasibility and design. So it wouldn't necessarily be an addendum to their work. It would be work that we would need to kind of be compelled to go down and look at in a serious manner. But yes, they are out there. I guarantee that. So if it's council's appetite to go through and look at a 50-50 investment share, then that's a possibility that we can look at. It's just, it would be different work than what sort of the first motion is kind of doing.
Well, I guess maybe that's where I'm confused in relation to what the proposed motion is looking at then, because I thought in the actual, what we were looking at is I guess preliminary and detailed design requirements of a full-scale solar farm. And I guess I just interpreted that to looking at what are all of the opportunities on both. So would that be a private or us involved alone to go it alone? Would that be in partnership? Would that be basically to have a private operator run it and we get some of the income from that? I mean, there's all sorts of alternatives. So I guess I just assumed that was what the I guess business case was going. I mean, I'm looking at it now, I could see where you are, but at the same time, I probably was under some sort of a perception that we were actually going to say, well, okay, this 200K that we're going to take out of the reserve will actually identify that this is something we move forward with, but then how do we best move forward with it should also be included in that, because of all of the opportunities that might be out there that I think I don't have a clue on. Like you've identified that you are contacted regularly. I was contacted by one person who said, I can run this. So
Yeah, you bet. So again, the 200,000 will, that's what it will cost to do the technical work, period. And so to go through and look at partnerships is something we can definitely do. Sorry, Kevin.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
Sorry, these mics are annoying tonight. But anyways, Kate was talking about this is the technical work. Now, we can certainly, we can certainly approach partnerships, and people are going to approach us with partnerships. I think the way to frame it is, St. Albert's already bringing equity to the table in that it owns the Badger lands where this would be sited, right? And then, as again, part of negotiations, if we were to do that, St. Albert is fronting the 200,000 for the technical work if council approves this motion. So it's the value of the Badger lands plus the 200,000 already, then there's the cost of the infrastructure to install. But what I'm saying is St. Albert's brought money to the table, the land and the engineering work that would be done. And that would, I guess, enter into negotiations of any partnership.
You're right, Ms. Mikes. So, but then how would that look in the sense of that? What in the design or the decision around that? How would you? So, as you identified, the 200,000 would identify the detailed design requirements. We already have the land, so a big chunk of this is done. Where would you insert what you just spoke about? Where would that come in?
Well, again, so St. Albert's put 200,000 plus the value of the Badger land. So the total project is the engineering, the land, and the solar farm infrastructure, right? So, if without getting into detailed numbers, if the land and the engineering represents 20%, then 80% of the project is left. So maybe a partner is paying 60% of the infrastructure and St. Albert's paying 40% of the infrastructure if it's a 50-50 partnership, right? So.
I guess maybe I apologize for my question. I understand that. I understand that process, and I think that we're bringing it all to the table. But then, where would you incorporate the negotiations in with identifying a partner or something like that? Or where would you say, why would we involve a partner when we can recoup it up? It
might be the right time to do it when the third motion, the second motion talks about bringing a detailed Q2 report to council. So that might be the place where we have the discussion with council, whether it's depending on what venue it's in, about partnerships or what council's appetite is to move forward. We'll have more detailed financial modeling for one at that point, and a more detailed understanding of capital investment at that point as well. So I think you'd have enough data to sort of put a business case towards a third party to say, let's work together and deliver this, as well as council has sufficient information to make those decisions of what they would prefer to do.
I guess to add to that, it wouldn't be onerous while we're doing this process to go out to the marketplace for expressions of interest, non-binding expressions of interest, and then at least we have an idea of who's interested and what they may want to bring to the table that we can, again, factor into the next step.
Okay, so would you need any amendment to any of the recommended motions, or would that just be part of the number one?
I gotta wait for you to turn yours off, I guess. A little quick on the draw. Well, I think again, it sounds like City of St. Albert's receiving a number of unsolicited interest already. So, I think we would have to formalize that anyways with an expression of interest. So I would suggest the two can run in parallel and then kind of consolidate them at the end for some, for recommendations to council.
I'm just as quick as you. I guess it's just a part of, the fact that we did bring it forward already to the recovery task force. And so it's out there. And so obviously it is generating enough interest, and it's obviously very successful in other municipalities and other adventures. So people have taken interest. So I don't think we should be surprised. The question I have quickly, Madam Mayor, process-wise. So is number 3, and I don't want to, and maybe we have to split these, but why would we be doing a borrowing bylaw now versus waiting for 1 and 2 and then looking at a borrowing bylaw, or is it just timing?
Sorry, I think you would have to bring the business case forward, and then it would go through budget. And then once it's approved there, then you get the borrowing bylaw. But if it doesn't get through budget, then 3's null and void.
But why bring it up today? Like, what, isn't that just part of process though? Like, why do we
I
have?
think it makes it clear that that's how we're funding it, through borrowing.
Well, how would we know that if we don't have 1 and 2?
No, you can defeat 3 if you want.
I'm just, it's process. It's just that it doesn't seem to be sequenced. It's just assuming that we're moving forward and that this is how we're doing it. And so I'm not debating it. I'm just questioning why are we doing it? It just seems, and I apologize to my previous committee members, but it just seems to be a process question is all.
I think partly what we were looking to do is there's a lot of federal grants available for funding, et cetera. And I think it provided a little bit of kind of momentum to keep people accountable of what would be going forward, because we wouldn't have the detailed work done on this project till Q2 2021. We obviously aren't hitting the 2021 normal budget process because we're working a little bit on its own path. So it was a way of bringing it forward again to council for their contemplation in 2021 if the business case and details were comfortable for council.
All right, thanks for the clarification. That's all my questions.
Okay. And I see no more hand. Oops, sorry. I just saw a hand up. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Councillor McKay's question there. In terms of provincial granting or federal granting, would it be important for them to know that we are willing to take out a borrowing bylaw? Is this I don't want to say optics thing necessarily, but maybe it is. Maybe it's the signal to them that we're willing to put some money down, or is it that we should seek funding and then seek a borrowing bylaw depending on what we get?
Is Diane around?
I am. Yeah, I would suggest it's probably a little bit of both, Councillor Hanson. Sometimes, optically, it's good when we can show that we have council motions that, that you're at least conceptually supportive of a project for us to go ahead and apply for grants. And I know Kate's modeling as well hasn't included, and Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not including any grants in the business case so that it's, we can show that it's would be successful even without. So any grants that we are able to get just makes the payback even shorter.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now I'm seeing no more questions. So Councillor Watkins, since you're the chair of the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, can I get you to move the recommendations that came out of your committee? Councillor Watkins? There he is.
Yes, just give me a second here.
Yep. They're in the chat if you want to find them there.
Quicker.
Tamara's doing a good job of putting them all in the chat. Is that you that are lowering hands and stuff too? Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Herron, can we split out number 3 and 5?
Okay, let's get him to read them first.
Okay, I don't see them in the chat yet. Where are they in the chat? Okay, here we go. Yep. Okay. That $200,000 be funded from the stabilization reserve to support the preliminary and detailed design requirements of a full-scale solar farm. That's one. Number two, that administration provide an update to council upon the completion of the detailed design of the solar farm by Q2 2021. Number three, that the borrowing bylaw be brought forward to support the implementation of the presented solar farm business case in 2021. Number four, that the back third of the Badger lands to be allocated to support the long-term development of solar as a green industry within the city. And number five, in 2021, administration be directed to bring back a report to rescind all previous council motions pertaining to the Badger lands that are not consistent with dedication of those lands to development of a solar power industry in St. Albert.
All right, so I'm going to accept those. Councillor Hughes, you wanted number 3 and number 5 split out? Is that correct?
Yeah, and I had a question about number 5. Yes, thank you. And could I also just ask a question about number 5 before we get started?
Go ahead.
Okay, so why? Because I know that number 4 is the motion was changed to have the back third allocated, but now all of the Badger lands are being sterilized just for the green industry. So I'm just even though only a third of it's being dedicated towards this, I'm just asking the administration, why would we say that all of it is now going to be for the green industry?
I think it was more about examining all the motions that have historically been put on the table to see what is, I guess, contradictory to what could be put there in the back end. And we would have to amend the existing motions that are, I'll say, on the table or in history to better reflect what council was looking for.
I don't think there's any motions.
That's not what it says. It says report.
Councillor Hughes, there are no motions.
And it's for all the
only about the 1/3. So when it comes back to us, we can massage the motion to say it's only the 1/3 is rescinded or whatever. But there's no motions on just a third of the land. So it's all of the land or none of it. But we would have to deal with it.
But we're rescinding all the motions, is what I'm saying. So, I mean, I don't know what the motions are that they would be dug up, but I mean, it's a motion. It's a statement to rescind everything.
We're not rescinding them today.
In spite of the fact that only a
report. We're getting a report, not rescinding today. And I do know there's one motion that's alive that says it should be used for affordable housing. So yeah, when we get that report, then we'll have to figure out what we're going to do to deal with those motions. Councillor, Mr. Scoble, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say there's, again, that it's just really, we have to do a complete review, but there could be a half dozen or more motions going back 10 or more years, right? So.
Exactly, yeah. That would need to be cleaned up, I guess, really.
Okay, but this is specific. If it's not development to the solar power industry, it's a report to rescind them. The intention is to rescind them. So I'm just wondering if it shouldn't just say bring back a report regarding all of them that are period. And then we can decide what we want to do because 2/3 of that land is still up for grabs. So what we're saying here in the report.
I'm going to suggest if you want to do that, you can make a motion to amend, or we can deal with it in 2021. This is just a report. You can do either one tonight.
Okay, well, I'll write up an amendment then, because I think that what we're saying is not reflective of what we're trying to do here. So I'll let you start the other ones and I'll type it up while you guys are talking. Okay,
so we can go ahead with motions 1, 2, and 4, Councillor Watkins. So if you want to do your opening arguments on 1, 2, and 4, go ahead.
Okay, for one, the $200,000, I understand that's a maximum upset limit, and that we're probably only going to spend about $60,000 in the next business case. For number 2, it's information. They're going to provide us a report in the second quarter of 2021. And number 4, back 1/3 of the Badger lands be used for the solar farm. And I believe this is the land that's the most contaminated with salt anyway, so it's a good use for it in the interim without trying to clean it up. Those are kind of my opening comments. I'll wait to close.
All right. Any hands up for debate on this one? I am seeing none, so I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor? Mayor Herron in favor, Councillor Watkins in favor, Councillor Jolly in favor, Councillor Mackay in favor. It's unanimous. There we go. Okay, so motion number 3, Councillor Watkins, sorry, the boring bylaw motion. Any comments on debate there?
No, not really. I'm kind of almost wondering why we need to be part at this point. The boring bylaw.
Sorry?
I'm kind of wondering myself why we need to bring the boring bylaw forward at this point.
Okay, so you might not be voting in favor of it.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to kind of hear if anybody else has any debate on it or if there's any clarification.
I don't think so. Okay, I'm waiting. There, I just wanted them cleared so I can see. Okay, so we had to clear the votes away. That cleared out hands. So if you had your hand up, put it back up. Councillor Broadhead, you indicated to me, and then I'll go to Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During our debate in committee, the whole question around this was around establishing a funding for the project. The idea was, as Ms. McMorty said earlier, to indicate to other levels of government who have funding for this that the city of St. Albert is behind the project. The idea is to have funding, a motion in place, but to pursue the granting through FCM and others, so that we can appeal for the granting that's out there. Honestly, this is a winner, and that's why everybody wants in at the gravy train. And quite honestly, I think we go forward as a community and build this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
I accept the comments and thank you again, Councillor Broadhead, for bringing some clarity to it. I just don't think we need, I just think this is putting it too much ahead of what potentially we will identify. And if we're going to bring forward a boring bylaw, we haven't even identified all of the numbers. I mean, I know there are some numbers out there potentially, but I think that I think you're right. I think that this is potentially a great project for us to be involved with. And that's why we have so many other people that are very interested or other entities and partners that are interested in joining this. But I don't think we need to go right to a borrowing bylaw at this particular time, because I don't even know. I just think we're just dealing with too many what ifs in relation to this. And I don't think we lose anything by getting the recommendations out of one, trying to get some of the detailed back in two, and then we can move forward with a borrowing bylaw. But until we know more, I mean, and particularly with the economic situation that we're looking at right now, I don't know what we're looking at. But I mean, I think that if we say we're going to have a borrowing bylaw, people could look at that and say, well, we'll let City of St. Albert take all the risk, and we'll whatever. So I just think we're just out of sequence here. So I don't really see the need for it at this particular time.
All right, I've got next in line, I've got Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Hanson.
Thanks. The reason why I pulled it is I just don't see it necessary right now. As Councillor Mackay said, I mean, we're assuming the results of a business case before even it's begun. If that's the case, we need to spend $200,000. We can just move forward on it. I think that we owe it to ourselves and to the residents to do due diligence and not presume the answer before we even see how the question's been formulated. We need to see the specifics of what are all the real costs, what is the real geotechnicals, what is going to be the reality of it, before you just assume that it's going to be an absolute gold mine. So I would like to just see the specifics. I'd like to see specifically how much is the average purchase price for the energy. When I do the math, it's coming in at 12.7 cents a kilowatt hour, which is more than any of us are paying for electricity right now. So I don't know how I got those numbers. I'm not sure about all the costs for the maintenance. I don't know the specifics of how the installation is going to manage. It's a lot of details here before we should say, go ahead with the borrowing bylaw. And if next year it looks like it's a feasible option, and we've done the proper due diligence, it doesn't take long to come up with a borrowing bylaw. Staff has done it many times. They could write up the paperwork for it in a week if it needed to happen, and then move forward on it. But I think that we should be, besides saying that we think it's a wonderful idea, also be saying we're doing the due diligence before we make our final decision. And that is also a statement we need to be making here. The government is not going to approve or not approve a grant based on whether or not you're telling people to bring a borrowing bylaw forward in 8 months or not. That's not the decision that they're going to be making it on. They're going to be making on whether or not it works and whether or not you need to move forward on it. But moving forward on it is dependent upon the business case. So when I saw this, I thought it doesn't belong with the other ones. Let's just not jump to conclusions until we actually see the full paper. Otherwise, we're wasting our money. That's it.
Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to support this motion along the same lines as Council Broadhead. If I were sitting at a provincial table or a federal table doling out money for projects, I would want to know if the municipality had some skin in the game. And I think this gives them a full picture of the extent of support that the municipality has. This is just a bylaw to say, if this comes to fruition, we have the ability to borrow money. And so I think that it's really important from the powers that be to see that we are serious about this. Otherwise, they come back and say, well, what are you guys going to do? What is your skin going to be in this game? So this is, I think, actually a really important piece of pushing this project forward. That's all I have.
Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. I would echo Councillor Hanson's comments. This is really showing that this is something that St. Albert is committed to and that we're excited about, and is showing that we're willing to put our kind of money where our mouth is. So I will be supporting the bylaw, or sorry, the motion.
Okay, I think that's everyone. So, all right, I'll just say a few things. Council, I got to tell you, this is frustrating me, this conversation. Whether we bring forward this motion now or after we've had step 2 doesn't really matter. The way that administration has presented this, all 5 recommendations, was the sequence of steps that are required. It doesn't matter if it's today or tomorrow, so I don't know why we're debating this. So first number 1 has to pass. Then we have to see the report. Then we have to do the borrowing bylaw. We're not approving a borrowing bylaw today. We're just telling them, and if we get to that step, do it. And this is legislative gymnastics at its worst. So I'm going to support it, because if there's even a hint that we could lose some sort of grant funding or federal funding if we didn't have this, I'm not willing to take that risk. So I think it's an easy and no-brainer and no-risk motion to have in front of us. Councillor Watkins to close.
Yeah, I'm going to support it too. As Councillor Broadhead said, it sends, and others said, it sends a strong message that we're willing to support this from business-wise, from a financial point of view. And it says that a borrowing bylaw be brought forward to support the implementation of the presented solar farm business case in 2021. So it's already talking about the business case being complete and it being brought forward in 2021. And it's just, and we're not approving it right now anyways. We're just saying, bring it forward, having it ready. And nobody's supporting or approving the borrowing of any money right now. We're just talking about bringing it forward so we can be ready to go. And I think it does show a good sign to those people who are willing to partner with us, that we're willing to put some skin in the game.
Thank you. Call for the vote. So I've got Mayor Herron in favor, Councillor Hanson in favor, Councillor Jolly in favor, Councillor Mackay opposed, Councillor Hughes opposed, Councillor Broadhead in favor, and Councillor Watkins in favor. So that's 5-2. Thank you. Counselor Hughes has a amendment to motion number 5. So I've accepted the motion as is. What is the amendment in your chat? So you're essentially striking out the entire motion and replacing it with that, Counselor Hughes?
Yes. I don't know if that's friendly to you, Councillor Watkins. The intention is just that it doesn't state sterilizing all the land. It says just bring back the report pertaining to it, and we'll have further discussion about which ones you want to keep and not keep.
So should the motion read that this first motion is stricken and replaced with?
Yes, that would be the more accurate. And strictly speaking, that may not be an amendment to a motion,
Yeah.
but practically, I mean, it's no harm in dealing with it that way if everybody understands that that's what's.
Okay,
being
can we get it written up so that it, yeah,
we
because
can-
it's not very well written. Okay. All right, Councillor Watkins, are you going to take that as a friendly?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Ray.
It's going to wait to let's see what it looks like.
Should we be saying something like that to bring back motions related to the Badgerlands for further council that would be detrimental to the solar farm or something like that, or that could impact the solar farm, or that could impact the development of the solar farm? Can we be a little more specific? Question.
Hold on, Councillor Watkins, because you just accepted the friendly, which I don't exactly know how it's worded yet. We're just waiting for Ledge.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking maybe crafting if you can incorporate that friendly.
The reason why I didn't specify related to a solar farm is I just thought that all the motions should come back and I didn't want to limit them. So by not saying specifically that it wouldn't help be detrimental to a solar farm, everything that's ever been brought forward on it would now be available without having any limitations.
Okay,
Because we still have 2/3 of the land to discuss.
Councillor Hughes, we're not
So
debating.
anyway, that's what
We're waiting for the motion to be in front of us. So just give us 2 seconds. Because I've already accepted Councillor Watkins' motion as it was, and so you can't just add that in. It's a brand new motion. Sorry, guys. Pardon? Yeah, as soon as this is done. We're taking a break as soon as this is done. Nobody put the little coffee mug up there yet. Click on the more button.
Mayor Herron, I have a process question.
Yes, go ahead.
So if this motion fails, and this is replacing the motion, what do we go back to? Nothing? Is this
If this motion
replacing?
fails, if you want to bring back the original motion, you can.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, is this what we want? That number 5 be struck and replaced with the following. There we go. That makes more sense. Thank you, guys. Okay, so Councillor Watkins, just so, because this was confusing, are you okay with that motion? That administration be directed to bring back a report pertaining to all previous motions related to the Badgerlands for further council discussion. You're muted. I don't know if you're trying to talk to us.
Yeah, I was just thinking, what was the original motion again? Because the original motion was to
Original motion was to bring back a report to rescind all previous council motions pertaining to the Badgerlands.
now, and then we said just direct.
Now it's just a report.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. This is the motion on the floor now. Okay, Councillor Watkins, it's your motion. I will let you have opening arguments. If you want.
I don't need my motion anymore because it's been changed, so I don't have any opening comments.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else have anything to add to this? Sorry, where's my mouse? Okay, I see Councillor Hanson's hand, then Councillor Jolly, then Councillor Hughes.
I think my hand was just not taken down.
Okay,
Sorry.
actually, I'm going to go to Councillor Hughes next, and then I'll go to Councillor Jolly.
Okay, thanks. The reason why I asked Councillor Watkins to accept this motion, and thank you for doing so, Ray, is just that what was reflected in motion number 5 changed, because I believe it was motion 4 where it was agreed that during the committee discussion that only a third of the land would be sterilized for the solar farm. And initially it was all the land would be sterilized for the solar farm. So then motion number 5 does not reflect what motion number 4 was changed to, which is that 1/3 of it is sterilized, 2/3 of it is not sterilized. And so it doesn't make sense to say 1/3 of it is being sterilized, but then we're going to rescind all motions relating to Badgerlands because some of it still may be relevant for the other 2/3. So that is why I asked that we just bring forward the remote report on all of them. And some of them council may still want to keep on the other 2/3 of the land, and some of them may not. And there may be a whole series of motions that arise from it from a further discussion. But to assume that everything needs to be rescinded, I think would be jumping the gun. We still have 60 acres out of the 80 that have not been allocated to anything at that point. And so I just think that what we should do is just have everything come out without having any limitations, and council can just discuss all of the previous council motions and then decide if any of them are still a fit or not. It's very possible that we'll rescind everything, but it's also possible that we may say that some of it is still valid and we still want to consider that for other portions of that land. But what we have determined is that all that land is not necessary for the solar farm, whether it's 5 or 15 megawatts. And so that is why I'm saying just bring it all back. Council can have a special council meeting or a workshop or whatever and discuss it further to figure out if anything is still relevant or if everything's outdated. So that is why I brought this forward, because that was, when I was asking the questions, it appeared to be that was the intention of what was being brought forward, but that did not reflect the words of our motion. And if you're doing something legal, the words should reflect what we're doing. So that is why I asked for that. And that's why I'm thanking again, Ray, for accepting it. It's very possible we could rescind everything, but let's just not assume anything and realize that 2/3 of this land still does not have a purpose to it, and that the other motions may still be relevant to it. So this just puts everything on the table and we can have that discussion later. And I'm confident that this council is not going to do something that's disrupt moving this forward before the business case comes forward, no matter what. I mean, we know that there's an intention for this land to go for the solar farm regardless. And so I think it would be unlikely, if not almost improbable, that somebody would bring forward a motion and say, let's do something different on the contaminated lands between now and next June, period. That would just be completely defined of what we're doing on this. But it still allows us to have that discussion. And I think that we actually should have that discussion if there is anything that needs to be cleaned up. Housekeeping wise, of whether or not this is the motions before are still relevant. So that's why I brought it forward and asked that to be done this way. It's not to stop it from coming forward, it's just that we have a thorough discussion and that the motion reflected the intention of what was being discussed. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Jolly, you had your hand up before. Did you want to?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
You did have it up. It was my imagination, right?
Yeah, no, it was up and I just don't have anything to say.
Okay. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I certainly understand what Councillor Hughes is trying to do through this motion. I think actually the original motion's pretty good. It does, for me, just require a small amendment like review and possibly rescind council motion. So I'm not going to support the motion as it stands. And if it fails, I will bring forward an amendment to the original motion. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Watkins, anything to close? Okay, call for the vote. And I have 5-2 with Mayor Herron, Councillor Mackay, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Broadhead, and Councillor Watkins in favor, and Hanson and Jolly opposed. All right. Tamara, you did have the little coffee cup up for a minute. We will take a break. We've been out for 2.5 hours. Why don't we take a dinner break and we'll be back in our chairs at 5 o'clock. Is 25 minutes good enough for everybody? All right. Okay, before I call this meeting back to order, do we have better motions for the recovery task force? Or is that just, you can let us do it? You know how the recovery task force motion was that the government do something? Not, we can't. Councillor Mackay? Was the intention of the recovery task force for me to write a letter? Okay, when you make these motions, can you say that? Okay, we're back because it's 5 o'clock. So we're just having a conversation about the next agenda item, 7.5. And oh, Councillor Mackay just left. Councillor Hanson, you were at recovery task force, were you not?
I have some comments to make about that. I actually don't have any trouble with these. I don't think we need to be prescriptive.
But we can't, as the city of St. Albert, make a motion that says the government of Alberta does something. We have to ask them to do something, right? That's the only difference. That's, yeah. So what was the conversation of recovery task force? I wasn't there, was that I write a letter or that we just advocate? Okay.
So if that were the case, then the motion will read that the government of Alberta be urged to
There we
do
go.
these things.
Okay,
Right?
Councillor Mackay, can you add the word urged in and then we'll read.
It doesn't preclude you from writing a letter. You can do it if you
Great,
want.
okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so Councillor Mackay, the motion is going to read that the government of Alberta be urged to establish the testing location of the government of, and that we ask the government of Alberta to prepare an implementation plan for establishing one or more locations. Okay. Go ahead. Just turn off on again. Oh.
How's that? Tamara, is that on chat? All right. Ready? Mayor? That the government of Alberta be urged to establish one or more COVID-19 testing locations in St. Albert. And number 2, that the government of Alberta be urged to prepare an implementation plan for establishing one or more COVID-19 vaccination locations in St. Albert when a vaccine becomes available. Is that the intent?
That's perfect. And so before I accept it, I'll ask that my staff prepare a letter, and that will be part of the urging, as I'll prepare letters on those 2 as well. But
yeah, I mean, and just in opening quick comments, and the recovery task force, a lot of the comments around this particular motion advocacy. We have a very large community and a catchment area, and whether it was pharmacies having testing or whether it was actual COVID-19 testing sites, nothing is very close to St. Albert or the region. And as you can tell, we often get questions from residents wondering why, and we have zero control over the why. All we can do is advocate and then also be ready. And Mr. Scoble was correct in the number 2 is potentially there are a number of locations within St. Albert that administration and council would support should vaccine become available, that we would be willing and able to establish those sites and this would just allow us to be ready and plan for mass scale vaccination opportunities for those who want that.
right, and I'll go to Councillor Jolly first, but I'll say thank you to her for kind of identifying that the motion was probably not very accurate. So thank you for that. This makes it better. Do you have anything on debate?
I have a question.
Go ahead. I didn't notice. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, in terms of, I completely support this, but in terms of vaccinations, does the task force know something that we don't know in terms of kind of where vaccination sites are planned? Because I know they do a great job of shingles and flu shots, and travel vaccine. So I'm wondering, are we expecting them to be worse for this vaccine?
No, I don't think the task force knows anything more than we do. I think historically when very specific outbreaks like SARS or H1N1 have occurred, when a vaccine for something comes out, there's lineups, and we want to make sure St. Albert residents have easy access. Is that kind of the conversation? Go ahead, Councillor Hanson. Oh. Kevin, can you turn your mic off?
There, I think I'm on. I think, Councillor Jolly, one of the issues that was brought up was that we didn't even get a pharmacy available for testing. Well, there's quite a few pharmacies in Edmonton. So anybody that is asymptomatic or wants to go to a pharmacy or go to the clinic, you're always having to travel. So
sorry, I'm not asking about testing, but about vaccination.
Well, I guess this leads into it. So when the time comes, we want both testing and vaccinations available within our city limits, within pharmacies.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor Heron, I do have just short debate comments whenever we're doing that.
We're doing it right now. Go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to thank the residents who have already started this advocacy. I know that many people have been emailing the MLA Nally. They've been emailing Minister Shandro because it's outrageous that St. Albert does not have any asymptomatic testing sites, let alone symptomatic testing sites. This advocacy is especially important as schools open up in the next couple of weeks, because any child who is symptomatic, and that could include a runny nose, a headache, is legally not permitted to go to school. So that means that you have to drive 30 minutes to get your child tested. And then you still have to wait for, 5-6 days before you get those results, before you can go back to school, before you're legally allowed to go back to school. And that's if you have access to a private vehicle. So St. Albert residents that don't own a car, or maybe only have one car per family and have, a parent working, they have no access to this. And it is absolutely ridiculous that we don't have this yet. So certainly I would encourage all of our residents to advocate on behalf of our entire community so that we can get these testing sites up and running as soon as possible. And hopefully we have one before school starts and September 1st or 31st. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Your hand was just up to answer the question? Or? Okay. All right. All right. Anything to close, Councillor Mackay?
No, I think it was well said by Councillor Jolly, and it was certainly recognized by the task force. And I think the background that Councillor Hanson added just adds more context to it. I mean, I just don't understand why, other than capacity, I guess, but it's certainly something that even a response would have been nice to have, and just say that this is the reason why. But I think that as Councillor Jolly's identified, we owe it to our residents to advocate strongly to be one that is considered for a testing site, and at least know the reasons why not if we don't have one.
All right, call for the vote. That is Councillor Hughes. Is Councillor Hughes with us? Okay, she's in favor, so that's unanimous. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, I'm here. It won't register. Yes.
Yeah, we got it. Thanks. Okay, so operational review was done on consent, but I'll read the motion. By the way, Council, I just checked the COVID stats that were just released. We have 3 new active cases, so we're up to 13. So what was on consent was that the council receive as information the report dated August 17th, 2020, entitled Operational and Fiscal Review, Internal Audit Steering Committee Selection of Consultant, which was Ernst & Young, correct? Yeah, thank you. Should have been in the motion, but it's in there. All right. Okay, the next thing is 8.1 Campbell Road Transit Center and Park and Ride naming. Is there any presentation on this, Mr. Scoble?
No.
No? Okay.
Yes.
Any questions from council? I see no questions. Considering we've already publicly named it, I think the motion passes. Can I get somebody to move the motion? Councillor Broadhead, go ahead. All things transit. Kevin, your mic's open again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the St. Albert Transit Center and Park and Ride be named Nagy. Well, Madam Mayor, you did a fine job, as did Sharon, in introducing the new name for our Park and Ride that's just south on Campbell Road. And when I first read it, it looked to me like Naki, but Sharon was gracious in extending some education around how the name is actually pronounced, and it's Nagy, and it means, correct me if I'm wrong, stop here. So that would be the name, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Any other comments for debate? Tamara, can we clear the previous vote? Okay, thanks. I'll just add that it was nice that Nagy meant stop or stop here in both Cree and Michif, which was pointed out by Sharon. So that was a nice thing. So call for the vote. That is unanimous. Okay, now we're on to the big item of the evening. Ms. McMorty, there you are. Let's hear about our 2020 financial forecast now that we're opening up facilities. You have a presentation, I assume?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
Just give me a second to share my screen. Can I just confirm that you can see the PowerPoint?
We sure can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so for the past 5 months and more, the world has been forced to deal with a global pandemic. Based on orders from the Provincial Medical Officer of Health, many businesses were forced to close their storefronts. Municipal and private recreational and cultural facilities suspended access and programs, and residents were advised to stay at home. During this time, staff, businesses, and residents showed their resilient nature in navigating through these unusual times. Many businesses quickly adapted to an online platform or learned how to manufacture much needed items like hand sanitizer. Staff quickly adapted to efficiently working from home, and residents found new ways to stay connected with family and friends. While people tried to find the positive in the situation, the shutdown of the economy has had deep and profound impacts on individuals, businesses, and governments. The specific impacts for the city of St. Albert include large losses of revenue in the recreation, culture, and transit services, as well as the need to incur additional unbudgeted costs for things such as cleaning supplies, signage, and barriers for our transit fleet. The magnitude of the financial impact to the city is forecasted at $14.4 million for 2020 alone. The potential lingering effects into 2021 and beyond are currently being assessed. Within days of the pandemic forcing the closure of our facilities, administration began identifying and making decisions on services and service levels and other measures that could be employed to mitigate the financial impacts above. In support of this approach, Council also supported recommendations for the cancellation of various projects and programs. Some of the methods employed include the temporary layoff of casual and permanent staff, redeployment of permanent staff to offset seasonal staffing requirements in public works and utilities, reduced turf maintenance, elimination of budget increases for staff, both cost of living and step adjustments, reduction of learning and development supports for staff, holding of vacancies, reduction to contract transit hours to reflect reduced ridership, elimination of some public art projects, as well as the 2020 allocation to public art, cancellation of some operating projects, and some cancellation of some grant projects. Through all of these measures, the city is forecasting that we will be able to offset the financial impacts of COVID-19 to the tune of 13.9 million, leaving a forecasted deficit of only 500,000. Through several motions of council, a total of 2.4 million has been committed from the stabilization reserve to support any remaining shortfalls. Based on the current forecasted deficit, it is not expected that the full amount of this will be required. The existence of the stabilization reserve allows council to address unexpected financial situations such as this without impacting property taxes. While the provincial relaunch strategy is well underway and is proceeding somewhat as planned, it is important to recognize that we continue to live in very uncertain times. The forecast presented today is based on the current state of the pandemic, the current guidelines from the Medical Officer of Health, and various assumptions surrounding residents' readiness to return. Should there be significant changes in any of these factors, such as a second wave of the virus, the city's financial situation could change quite quickly, so we need to remain nimble and be prepared to act quickly if warranted. While it is unknown to what extent and for how long COVID-19 will continue to impact our lives, it's reasonable to assume that there will continue to be lingering impacts into the 2021 fiscal year and potentially longer. Administration has begun the process to understand what these impacts may be in terms of our future year's revenues and expenses. A forecasted deficit for 2021 will need to be addressed through the strategies presented here. In March 2020, when COVID-19 was declared a world pandemic, the City of St. Albert took swift action to ensure the safety of our residents and staff through the closure of civic facilities and programs. Recognizing the impact that this was going to have on our financial position, both administration and council also took swift action to mitigate those impacts through expense reductions. While the immediate financial impact in 2020 was the most pressing issue to be addressed, work has already begun to understand and strategically plan for the future. Identifying what options are available to us should we find ourselves facing continued revenue shortfalls ensures that decisions are well thought out, balanced, and provide the best outcomes for our residents, businesses, and community partners. And I'm just going to quickly turn it over to Kevin for some closing comments.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, we just wanted to highlight the the success of the financial response here due to the again, the proactive collaboration and understanding of council and staff and the public, and everybody really stepped up with the mindset here to mitigate this. And so I think it is a real coup for St. Albert here, and we find ourselves in a very enviable position. So just again, thanks to everybody. It was a huge team effort.
I agree. I think this was a report that I was scared to open, and in the end it was okay. So any questions? Councillor Broadhead, go ahead, and then Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The federal government recently announced some rebates. I was just wondering if we've got any update as to when federal assistance funds will be flowing through the province to the municipalities.
Yes, so at this time, we still haven't received any details from the province or the federal government in terms of some of those relief programs, when we might, be receiving some, and in even potentially what our allocation would be. So we're monitoring that closely, and you'll know as soon as we know.
Ultimately, though, it will be a reduction of the deficit, if you will. Am I reading that correct?
Potentially. So how I understand it is that some of the funds may be applied retroactively for deficits that occurred during 2020, and some of them will be available to help bridge the gap for at least some time in the future. So again, we have to find out what the parameters are around some of those programs.
Okay, thank you very much. And I too want to say thank you and a good job.
Okay, Councillor Mackay, then Councillor Hanson.
Actually, Councillor Broadhead asked the one question I had in relation to potentially timing and the impact of that timing. So, but I was going to move the recommendation, but not sure I can do that after Councillor Hanson's question.
Okay, Councillor Hanson, then Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in terms of, I want to thank you for the report. And as everybody said, huge team effort and with so many unknowns. So we really appreciate this report. When you go to page 4 of 6 of this report, which is 170 of our package, lost revenues, there is an other category there that's 3.7. I'm sorry if I missed that in your presentation, but can you just highlight what other is?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did in this forecast that we weren't able to do earlier in the year, so in the earlier forecast, we only looked at those sort of 3 main areas that, were impacted by COVID, being rec, culture, and transit. And so we had the organization actually go through an exercise to where all the departments, we asked them to do a forecast. And so this, this is the other revenue. So we had other program areas that weren't directly impacted by closures that were also experiencing some revenue shortfalls. So like some of them related to lower than forecasted like permitting fees. While things were still moving along, we were getting less revenue than we had originally anticipated. But I understand that that's also kind of starting to pick up again too. So hopefully we'll maybe be able to make up for some of those losses. Yeah, so it just incorporates all the other maybe revenue sources that kind of weren't included in the past, but that's the majority of it.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for everybody going through everything with a fine tooth comb to figure out what these numbers are realistically. So great job.
All right, Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. So a couple of questions. What are we assuming, like what's happening with the UPass for transit? Because my understanding is everything's being done remote for U of A, for example, which is a huge income. So are we assuming zero money from UPass, or we're not getting that, or what's going on with that?
Yes, so this forecast actually includes zero money for UPass. In our original forecasts, we had that revenue actually coming back in September before we heard the announcements that actually all of the universities, the Grant MacEwan as well, are going 100% online. So this one already has 100% of that revenue removed, but it also has some corresponding expense decreases in terms of the amount of contract hours that we would need to run those routes as well.
Got it. How is you mentioned a little bit about the facility usage. So on these assumptions, are we assuming less facility usage than we thought, or how is the uptake coming? I know it's only been a few weeks in some cases. It may not be you, Ms. McMorty, and you stand for Mr. Scoble, but how is the community response? Has it been what we're predicting it to be, or higher or lower?
Yeah, so I think actually Diane Engers actually should be online. She said she was going to join in because I thought this question might be asked. Our forecasts were based on what we felt were fairly conservative numbers. And like you said, it's only been a couple of weeks. So I'll give a second to see if Diane jumps on or not.
Good afternoon, I am here. So just to, reiterate what Diane McMorty had said, our revenue, our utilization is pretty conservative, but we have been meeting our projections in terms of utilization. We are quite in line with our revenue. We have decreased expenses based on our utilization, but overall, we've seen the community come back. So over 1,000 people have attended the water park. We have over 600 memberships at Service Place that have been reenacted already to date without the rest of the facilities being open yet. We have about 2,500 users in the fitness center, and it's been about 28 days of operation. We've only had 2 weeks of our pool being open. However, there's been 1,300 users in our pool, and 31 members have reenacted their membership. So it is conservative. It is a bit slower. Of course, it is a slower time of the year with summer. But we are in line with what we have projected.
Okay. So, and are we like pretty much in line, or are we actually exceeding it a little bit, or just pretty much what we expected?
Currently, right now, again, currently it is early days, but we are in line with what we have projected.
Okay. And then I read in an email that somebody thought that like the pool hours were going to be extended and there was going to be more swimming lessons available as of September. Is that the case, or are we actually going to be increasing further, I guess, in the next month?
Specifically with Fountain Park and swim lessons. So we have one session that started this week actually. So we have about 180 participants in swim lessons for this 2-week session. And when we move into September 1st, we are extending the hours for Fountain Park And then we'll open up the rest of the amenities at Service Place and go to regular operating hours for September 1st. So there will be
Okay.
more swim lessons available as well for September.
That's great. And are we predicting like a 25% or 50% capacity of as far as revenue goes in these, or what are you predicting the level of response to be?
So we have staggered the percentage based on when we open. So right now it's about 20%. And as the months go on, we have increased it to 30%, 40%. We're not projecting getting back to 100%, so pre-COVID numbers for at least until next spring. And it will all depend on what happens in the next little while here with uptake. We found opening the facilities early days, people have responded. And again, our staff have done an amazing job putting a safe plan in place for people to recreate. But we do find that our numbers will increase in the fall, and we are hoping that people will feel comfortable coming back as the weather gets cooler and people want to be inside. So we have increased our utilization numbers based on what we expect based on user patterns, weather, those kinds of things. Our rental revenue and our rental hours have been strong. Our 3 arenas that are open at Service Place have been open for a couple of weeks. And all 3 have had strong bookings. We've opened up Ginla and Kinex as well. And September looks like full arena use going forward for our busy season.
Okay, that's actually good news to me, Diane. Also that you're not overestimating the numbers sounds great to me as well. So all that's good news. I had one more question to Ms. McMorty. So Diane, other Diane now. So the $500,000 that we're short right now, is that the $500,000 coming out of the stabilization, or we had allocated like 2.4 million or something from stabilization to cover the shortfall? Is the 2.4 million in that 14, or is it only taking 500,000 from the stabilization to cover that shortfall?
So that's correct. So if we end up in a year-end position of a $500,000 deficit, that is all we would require from the stabilization reserve is the amount to fund that. We would probably still want to hold, like right now, we sort of have that money held based on those council motions, because until we get to an actual year-end, not knowing what could change, we would sort of want to keep that money committed until such time as we knew what our final number was. And then we would only need to require that. We'd be able to release the rest of it sort of back.
So right now we have like 1.3, or I don't remember how much down we're down because we just did another motion. Let's just say it's 1.3 for argument's sake. Is that assuming that we use the 2.4 million from it? Like if we taken that money technically out of circulation and we had 1.3 that had not been committed, or?
That's correct. So whenever I give you stabilization numbers, it's always the uncommitted portion. So we had already pre-committed this 2.4, so it hasn't even been included in those numbers.
So the other question I'm wondering, available. So I'm not sure at the end of year, I'm expecting you guys to kind of tell us which one you prefer, because it's simple to say take it with stabilization, but if the stabilization got too low, it might be worthwhile to use the line of credit and then to pay that off. So at the end of the year, it might be a discussion of which way we think is a better way to handle it, because the line of credit is specifically only for operational shortfalls, whereas the stabilization, if we take it out of there, we don't have to use the line of credit, but at the same time, the line of credit isn't available to us except for specific areas. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, except for the only thing I would consider is that really the line of credit was really to deal with if we had shortfalls of cash. And we don't actually have shortfalls of cash, because if we borrow from the line of credit, we have to pay it back anyway. So whether we'd be paying it back through existing reserves or through a tax increase, you would in essence end up just paying interest on a loan when we theoretically already have the cash. So it's really only intended if we actually have a cash shortfall because we're waiting for monies to come in. Think of it as a financing source versus a funding source, right? So right now we have an available funding source, which is our reserves, and we could talk about potentially different reserves. The stabilization is the one that's pretty much designed for this type of a situation, but we can look at other reserves as well.
Okay, so this is actually a good news story you're giving us today. As far as I hear, Diane, this is a fairly good news story, that it's not nearly as bad as we thought after we took off all of our cost-saving measures. And worst case scenario, we're going to take about 1/5 of what we were projecting from the stabilization to handle the deficit, assuming that all of our assumptions are correct.
That's correct. I mean, I think I think it is a really good news story. I mean, like I had mentioned, the actual impact of this event is $14.4 million, which is, astronomical. So the fact that council was supportive of, all the work that administration was trying to do and trying to save costs and taking that, that financial management seriously, really paid off. And we ended up in a pretty good situation. So I'm, certainly pretty pleased with that and feel like I actually got to deliver a good news story this time.
Yeah, this is pretty good. It's all contingent on whether or not our assumptions are correct, though. So we'll see in 4 months. As it gets closer, we have a better idea of whether or not we're there. But at least today, it looks like we'll be okay financially moving forward. We'll worry about 2021 as well. But thank you for this information. That's it.
All right. No more questions. Wow, you guys are quiet. I just had a quick one, and it's more for my own clarification. When you were listing off some of the measures that we've done to come up with the 13.9 in savings, you said elimination of budget increases for staff, both cost of living and STEP. Did we approve a cost of living? I was confused there.
That's for non-union, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right. No more questions. So does anyone want to make the motion? You got your question mark. You said yes.
Hey, no, I said I'd move it.
Okay, go ahead.
That the August 17th, 2020 report titled 2020 Financial Forecast COVID-19 Facility Reopenings be received for information.
Thank you for that. Any comments?
Yeah, actually, the only opening comments are building on what Ms. Morty just said. I mean, we can't forget that there is $14.4 million, and it's fantastic, great news, and kudos is absolutely needs to be sent out to everybody who was responsible for this. But I also have to note that even if our assumptions are correct, we will not, I don't know how we would survive if something happened that required us to shut down again. So everything that we do is prefaced on, that's a tough word to say for some reason. It must be because of the barriers here. It's hoping that we will never have to shut down again or look at closing our facilities, because all this good work and will basically have some we'll just, I was going to say go to waste, but that's not true, because we can obviously build off of it. But I don't know how some of our finances will survive, and there'll be some challenges moving forward. So absolutely kudos to staff, kudos to the residents as well for stepping up and supporting as city administration. Let's hope that we can make it through and continue with our reopening of our facilities and start to build back into more of a normal revenue, so that we don't have to look at any other strategies that coming forward in 2021. Anyways, that's all my comments.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mackay. I see no more hands popping up. So I'm going to just call for the vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Councillor Watkins. You can just, where'd it go? Councillor Watkins, you got it? There we go. There we go. That's the unanimous. All right. Next on the agenda is 8.3, request for withdrawal from Historic Sites Reserve, Museum Historic Sites Fund. Okay, Paul, are you with us somewhere? There he is. Okay. Okay, you're on mute. Do you have a presentation?
I do not have a formal presentation, but I can answer questions.
Okay, well then we'll just go straight to questions. Does anyone have any questions for Paul on this topic? I'm seeing no hand. Oh, Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Trying to find my button. Paul, just in terms of timing, what would be the implications if we put this request for withdrawal on hold for a little while? I mean, is the work getting done? Are we kind of in the middle of it? Can you just provide us a little bit of context?
Absolutely. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. The key thing here is that the Arts and Heritage Foundation has secured $32,000 in provincial funding. That provincial funding runs out at the end of December. So, and there's no guarantee that we'll get another grant from the province if we delay this past this fall, because it is such a big job. It does need to happen now while the weather is still good to get it. So you could delay it, but it could put us on the hook for the full cost rather than $32,000 less from the province.
Well, then that really helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. I see no more hands up. Councillor Hanson, do you want to make the motion? Thanks.
This is tricky. That $49,000 be withdrawn from the outside agency operating reserve Museum Historic Sites Fund to support the repainting of the 1906 Alberta Grain Company grain elevator.
Thank you for that. I'm going to accept your motion. Any opening comments?
I would just say, you know, it really is a gem in our city, and we're so lucky to have those grain elevators, which have been taken down in other municipalities as a cost to them, and people continue to come and see them, and it's a great part of our history and culture. So I am delighted to see this go ahead, and I appreciate the fact that if we don't do this now, it could cost us more later. So thanks for your work on this, Paul.
All right, any more comments? Seeing none, call for the vote. That looks like it's unanimous. Okay, thank you. I thought that was going to take a little bit longer. No emergent items on our agenda today. The Q2 financial summary was approved on consent. Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead, for bringing forward the motion for my AUMA vice presidency. I will submit that now. Thanks for the vibrant debate on that one. Any information requests, notices, motions, or announcements from council?
I didn't say I was going to vote for you at AU.
I see no hands up for IRs or anything, so I'm moving on. No one from the public here to speak. No business arising from that. All right, I need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Broadhead. Thank you.
All right. Hang on, I just got to. That council move in camera to discuss a matter pursuant to the subsection 24(1)A and 24(1)C of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Thank you very much. Call for the vote. That's unanimous. All right, we're staying in chambers, but we are logging out of Zoom because I'm looking, yeah, nothing is going to come out publicly. So I'm going to log out of Zoom and we will meet you at a Teams meeting. There's nobody up there. And actually, Carrie, did the doors get shut? Okay, thanks. Yeah.